Montana, 1991. The wind came cold across the cemetery, carrying the smell of pine and snow from the mountains beyond. 5-year-old Emma Keller stood between her mother's trembling hands, staring at the flag-draped coffin that held what remained of her father. She did not cry. The other children at the funeral whispered about that, about the strange little girl with the blank face who watched them lower Army Captain David Keller into the frozen ground without shedding a single tear. Her grandfather knelt beside her, his knees creaking with the effort. Robert Keller was 73 years old, and his body carried the map of 2 wars: shrapnel scars from Normandy, frostbite damage from the Chosin Reservoir, a Purple Heart earned in blood on beaches Emma would only read about in history books. He pressed something cold into her palm. Dog tags, her father's dog tags. "Keller serve," he said. His voice was granite scraped against sandpaper. "It's who we are, Emmy. Your daddy died so other men could come home to their families. You understand that?" Emma looked down at the metal tags. They were warm from her grandfather's hand, but they felt heavy, heavier than metal should feel. "Do you understand?" her grandfather asked again. "Yes, sir," Emma whispered. The flag came off the coffin in a practiced triangle fold. 7 men in dress uniform, moving like a machine designed for grief. The officer presenting the flag had tears in his eyes, but Emma's mother just stared at it like she was looking at something from very far away. "Thank you for his service," the officer said. Words he had said 100 times before. Words he would say 100 times again. Emma did not understand death yet. Not really, but she understood absence. The empty chair at the dinner table. The boots by the door that nobody would ever fill. The smell of her father's aftershave fading from the bathroom until one day it was just gone, and she could not remember it anymore no matter how hard she tried. 13 years later, Emma stood in the same cemetery wearing a black dress she had bought the day before because none of her old ones fit anymore. She was 18 now, and her grandfather lay in a coffin identical to the one that had held her father. Robert Keller had made it to 83. 2 wars, 3 marriages, and a lifetime of nightmares that woke him screaming about boys burning in tanks. In the end, it was just his heart that quit. It stopped in his sleep, which the doctors said was a mercy. The crowd was smaller this time. Most of the men who served with Robert Keller were already dead. But one man stood at attention throughout the entire service, and Emma recognized him even though she had only seen him once, at her father's funeral 13 years before. Master Chief Warrant Officer James McCready. 6'2", broad shoulders turning gray at the edges, a face carved from Old Testament vengeance and government-issued discipline. After the burial, he approached her. "Emma," he said, "you probably don't remember me." "I remember," she said. "You were at my dad's funeral." McCready nodded. "Your old man saved my life in '91. Desert Storm. We were pinned down by an Iraqi T-72. Your dad grabbed a law rocket and ran straight at it." Emma had heard this story before from her grandfather, but she let McCready tell it anyway. "I ordered him to stay put," McCready continued. "He disobeyed, took out the tank. But the explosion, he was too close. He took shrapnel that should have killed him instantly, but he held on long enough for the medevac. Died 2 hours later in a field hospital." McCready's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. "Before he died, he made me promise something. If anything happened to him, I'd look after his family. I've been paying your mom's mortgage for 13 years. She doesn't know. I had the bank tell her it was a veterans benefit program." Emma stared at him. "Why?" "Because your dad saved my life," McCready said, "and I pay my debts." The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the fresh-turned earth of her grandfather's grave. "I'm enlisting," Emma said. "Army engineers." McCready studied her face. "You're small. 5 foot even?" 4'10", Emma said, 92 pounds. "They'll eat you alive in basic." "I know," Emma said. "I'm doing it anyway." McCready almost smiled. "Almost. Your dad would be proud. So would your granddad." He pulled a business card from his pocket and pressed it into her hand. "You need anything, you call that number. Understand?" "Yes, sir." McCready looked at the headstone, then back at Emma. "One more thing. Your granddad asked me to give you this if anything happened to him." He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a rifle scope, old and scratched, with initials carved into the housing. R.K. Robert Keller. "He carried that scope from Normandy to Korea," McCready said. "Killed more Germans and Chinese than he could count with it. He told me that size doesn't matter. Discipline does. Your daddy was small for infantry too. made him careful. Careful men live longer. Emma closed the box and held it against her chest. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet, McCready said. The path you're choosing, it'll cost you everything. I know, Emma said. Keller serve. It's who we are. McCready nodded once, sharp and final, then walked away. Emma stood at her grandfather's grave until the sun dropped behind the mountains and the cemetery workers started locking the gates. She traced the letters carved into the marble. Robert Keller, Sergeant Major, United States Army, World War II, Korea, the dates of his birth and death. Between them, a life measured in mud and blood and sleepless nights. She opened the wooden box again and looked at the old scope. Her grandfather's hands had touched this metal. Her grandfather's eye had looked through this glass at men he was about to kill. Men with families. Men with daughters, maybe. Emma put the scope back in the box and closed the lid. I'll make you proud, Granddad, she whispered to the stone. I promise. The wind was the only thing that answered. 15 years vanished in the space between heartbeats. Emma Keller was 23 now, and the girl who stood at her grandfather's grave was gone. In her place was something the Army had built from her bones. 4 years of training, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, a specialty in structural engineering and precision marksmanship that made her useful to people who fought wars from the shadows. She stood in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and slow death. Walter Reed Medical Center, Building 18, Oncology Wing. Master Chief Warrant Officer James McCready sat in a hospital bed that was too small for his frame, staring at an X-ray illuminated on a light board. His lungs looked like storm clouds, white masses blooming where healthy tissues should be black and clear. Stage 3, the Navy doctor said. He was young, maybe 30, with the exhausted eyes of someone who delivered bad news for a living. The tumor in your right lung is inoperable. It's wrapped around the pulmonary artery. If we try to remove it, you'll bleed out on the table. McCready said nothing. Chemotherapy might buy you 18 months, the doctor continued. Maybe 2 years if we're aggressive, but the treatment will be. He paused, searching for a word that was not brutal. Difficult. How long without treatment? McCready asked. The doctor looked at his chart. 3 months, maybe 4. McCready nodded. Then I've got time. Chief, I really think you should consider treatment. The doctor's voice had the desperate edge of someone who knew he was losing an argument before it started. I appreciate your concern, doctor, McCready said, but I'm not dying in a hospital bed. I'm dying in the field. That's not how this works. You'll be medically retired. You can't just... I've got 34 years of service, McCready interrupted. I've earned the right to choose my exit, and I choose to go out doing the job. The doctor opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at McCready's file, probably seeing the list of deployments, the commendations, the summary of a life spent in violence. I can't stop you, the doctor said quietly, but I think you're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first, McCready said. After the doctor left, McCready sat in the silence of the hospital room. Through the window, he could see the Potomac River, dark and slow. Across the water, Arlington National Cemetery stretched up the hillside, rows of white stones, thousands of them. The price America paid for existing. McCready sat with the phone in his hand for a long time, staring at the numbers on the screen. His fingers were thick and scarred from 3 decades of hard use. They had pulled triggers, tied tourniquets, carried wounded men across desert floors and mountain ridges. Now they trembled slightly, and he could not tell if it was from the cancer or from fear. Maybe both. He made the call. The voice that answered was crisp and efficient, the sound of someone who existed in a world of classified communications and sanitized violence. JSOC operations. This is Master Chief McCready. I need to talk to General Matheson. A pause, the clicking of keys, then, hold please, Chief. 30 seconds of silence. McCready listened to his own breathing in the hospital room. Each breath rattled slightly now, a sound that had not been there a month ago. The tumor pressing against his airways, stealing oxygen molecule by molecule. Another click, and a different voice came on the line. Older, familiar, weighted with the burden of command. McCready, I heard about the diagnosis. I'm sorry, James. The use of his first name told McCready everything he needed to know. This was not a commander speaking to a subordinate. This was one old soldier speaking to another, both of them close enough to the end to dispense with formality. Don't be, McCready said. I need a favor, General. I'm listening. I've got 3 months, maybe 4. I want one more mission before I punch out. Silence on the other end. McCready could hear the general breathing, could imagine him sitting in his office at Fort Bragg, looking at the photos on his wall, the unit citations, the men who had not come home. McCready, you know I can't authorize that. You're medically unfit for— I'm fit until I'm dead, McCready interrupted. And I'm asking for one last ride, not a favor. I'm calling in a debt. The silence stretched longer this time, a full 30 seconds. McCready could hear his heart beating in his ears, could feel each pulse pushing blood through arteries that were feeding the thing killing him. You pulled my son out of Fallujah in '04, General Matheson said finally. His voice was different now, quieter, human. Carried him 2 miles under fire with a bullet in your leg. Third-degree burns on your hands from dragging him out of that burning Humvee. If you hadn't done that, he'd be on a wall at Langley instead of teaching at the War College. Instead of having a wife and 2 daughters who call me Grandpa. I remember, McCready said. He did remember. Every step of those 2 miles. The weight of Captain Matheson's body, the smell of burning flesh, the sound of rounds cracking past his head, the certainty that he was going to die in that Iraqi street, and the stubborn refusal to do so before he got the captain to safety. What kind of mission are you looking for? The general asked. Something that matters, McCready said. Something that'll make the last 34 years mean something. I don't want to die wondering if any of this was worth it. General Matheson was quiet for a moment. Then, there's a target in Syria, high-value chemical weapons dealer, the kind of man who sells sarin to terrorists. We've been trying to get approval for a direct action for 6 months. State Department keeps blocking it. Political considerations. McCready felt something stir in his chest. Not hope, exactly, but purpose. If I can get this approved, the general continued, it'll be a small team. High risk, no backup, no air support. You go in, you're on your own. And McCready, if you die out there, I'll have to answer for it. Then don't let me die alone, McCready said. Give me a good team. Let me do this right. The general exhaled. It sounded like a man setting down a weight he had carried for too long. I'll see what I can do, he said. But McCready, if you die out there, then I die where I'm supposed to, McCready said. Not in a bed with tubes in my arms. Not with morphine turning my brain to mush. I die in the field, doing the job, protecting people who will never know my name. That's the deal I made when I was 18 years old. I'm just asking to honor it. He hung up before the general could argue, before either of them could acknowledge the thing they both knew. McCready was not coming back from this mission. The cancer would kill him in 3 months, or a bullet would kill him in Syria. Either way, the ending was already written. The only question was whether he got to choose the last chapter. McCready looked at the x-ray again. The white blooms in his lungs looked like flowers, deadly flowers, growing in the dark, feeding on him from the inside. He had breathed burn pit smoke in Iraq, dust from collapsed buildings in Afghanistan, probably some chemical weapons residue in Syria that nobody wanted to talk about. 34 years of breathing the air in places where America fought its wars, and now those wars were killing him from within. Fair enough, he thought. I signed up for this. He pulled his phone out again and scrolled through his contacts, found the number he was looking for. Emma Keller. He had kept track of her over the years, watched her graduate basic training, followed her deployments to Afghanistan, pulled strings to get her into advanced marksmanship courses. She never knew he was watching, and he never told her. Just kept his promise to her father. Looked after David Keller's daughter from a distance. Now he was going to bring her into the dark with him. McCready dialed the number. 2,000 miles away in a barracks at Fort Bragg, Specialist Emma Keller's phone buzzed. She looked at the caller ID. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. Keller, she said. Emma, a familiar voice said, it's McCready. She sat up straight on her bunk. Chief, it's been a while. I need you to do something for me, McCready said. Anything, Emma said without hesitation. I've been asked to recommend a structural specialist for a JSOC mission. High risk, direct action. I recommended you. Emma's heart kicked against her ribs. Sir, I'm just Army engineers. I'm not special operations. You've got the skill set they need, McCready said. And I've seen your file. 2 deployments. Expert marksman. Top of your class in structural analysis. You're exactly what they're looking for. When? Emma asked. 2 weeks. You'll report to Dam Neck for mission brief. Full kit, low profile. Tell your CO you're being attached to a joint task force. He'll get the paperwork. Can you tell me what the mission is? Not over the phone, McCready said. But Emma, I need you to understand something. This is going to be dangerous, and I can't promise you'll come back. Emma looked around her barracks room. The plain walls, the government-issue furniture, the life she had built from the wreckage of her father's death and her grandfather's legacy. I'll be there, Chief, she said. Good, McCready said. And Emma, one more thing. Sir, your dad would be proud of you. The line went dead before she could respond. Emma sat on her bunk, holding the phone, feeling the weight of something shifting in her life. She did not know what the mission was. She did not know if she would survive it. But she knew with absolute certainty that this was what she had been built for. Everything that came before, all the training, all the deployments, all the nights she lay awake wondering if she was good enough, it had been leading to this moment. She stood and walked to her locker, opened it. Inside, mounted on the door, was the old rifle scope her grandfather had carried through 2 wars. Next to it, a photograph of her father in desert camouflage, young and smiling, standing next to a vehicle in Kuwait weeks before he died. Emma touched the photo. I'm ready, Dad, she whispered. 2 weeks later, Emma stood in front of Forward Operating Base Copperhead in eastern Syria. The base was a collection of prefabricated buildings and razor wire, dropped into the desert like a spaceship from a more organized world. Helicopters came and went, their rotors beating the air into submission. Men in civilian clothes carrying military weapons walked with the coiled tension of people who lived on the edge of violence. Emma reported to the operations center with her duffel bag and her modified SR-25 rifle. The weapon was custom built for her frame. Shorter stock, adjusted trigger pull. It had been her father's rifle once, rebuilt and refined until it fit her hands like it was grown there. Inside the operations center, she found 6 men gathered around a topographical map. They looked up when she entered, and the room went quiet. One of the men stepped forward, Master Chief McCready. He looked different than Emma remembered. Thinner, older. His eyes had a hollow quality that had not been there before, but his handshake was still iron. Keller, McCready said. Good to see you. Sir, Emma said. McCready gestured to the other men. This is SEAL Team 7. You'll be attached to us for this operation. The introductions were brief and functional. Senior Chief Petty Officer Wade Garrett, 45, built like a linebacker, with a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. He looked at Emma the way someone might look at a piece of equipment they did not order. Petty Officer First Class Carlos Reyes, 28, tech specialist, quick eyes that cataloged everything. Petty Officer Second Class Michael Davis, 32, sniper, quiet in the way that professional killers are quiet. Lieutenant Commander Paul Hendricks, 36, officer in charge, with the practiced calm of someone who had made peace with sending men to die. And at the far end of the table, watching Emma with undisguised skepticism, a man who introduced himself as Senior Chief Wade Garrett. What's an Army pogue doing on a SEAL op? Garrett asked. His voice was not hostile exactly, just blunt. Specialist Keller is our structural specialist, McCready said. She's here because I asked for her. Garrett's eyes flicked from McCready to Emma, measuring, calculating. She's smaller than my daughter. This is a joke. Emma said nothing. She had learned a long time ago that words meant nothing to men like this. Only performance mattered. McCready stepped between them. Keller earned her slot. Her old man saved my life in Desert Storm. She's here because I trust her. And if that's not good enough for you, Garrett, you can take it up with the general. Garrett held McCready's eyes for a long moment, then looked away. Whatever you say, Chief. The briefing began. Lieutenant Commander Hendricks pointed to the map. Our target is here, 60 miles from the Turkish border, abandoned pharmaceutical plant. Intel says it's being used as a command center by a high-value target we're calling the broker. Real name Ibrahim al-Nazari, age 62, Syrian national, former chemical weapons specialist under Assad. Now he's freelancing, selling sarin and VX to whoever can pay. Hendricks pulled up a satellite image. The pharmaceutical plant was a 5-story concrete structure, windows blown out, surrounded by smaller buildings and rubble. The broker is on the 4th floor, Hendricks continued. He's got approximately 30 to 50 guards, mix of Syrian irregulars and foreign fighters. They know we're coming eventually, so they're fortified. How do we know he's there? Reyes asked. Sigint picked up a phone call 2 days ago, Hendricks said. The broker talking about a shipment of sarin going to an ISIS cell in Mosul. NSA triangulated the call to this building. McCready leaned over the map. What's the structure? Emma spoke for the first time. May I, sir? Hendricks nodded. Emma stepped to the map. She pointed to the satellite image. The building was constructed in 1978 as a state pharmaceutical facility, reinforced concrete with a steel frame, 5 stories. The main support columns are here, here, and here. If those columns are compromised, the upper floors will collapse. She traced the layout with her finger. The stairwells are external here on the north and south sides. If we need to deny enemy movement between floors, we can collapse the stairs with shaped charges. But if we do that, we'll be trapped on whatever floor we're on. Garrett was watching her now, actually listening. What about the roof? McCready asked. Accessible via an internal ladder on the 5th floor, Emma said. The roof structure can support a helicopter landing, but barely. I wouldn't want to put a Black Hawk down there unless we had no other option. Hendricks nodded. Good. Keller, you'll be carrying the demo kit. If we need to adjust the structure, you make the call. The mission brief continued. Insertion via MH-60 at 0300. 3-kilometer hump to the target. Breach and clear. Capture or kill the broker. Exfil via the same bird. Simple on paper, brutal in execution. Wheels up in 6 hours, Hendricks said. Get your gear squared away. The men filed out. Emma started to follow, but McCready's hand on her shoulder stopped her. Keller, he said quietly, walk with me. They stepped outside into the Syrian night. The desert air was cold, the sky blazing with stars that seemed close enough to touch. In the distance, artillery rumbled like distant thunder. They walked in silence to the edge of the base, where the razor wire marked the boundary between order and chaos. You need to know something, McCready said finally. This is my last mission. Emma looked at him. Sir? I've got cancer, McCready said. Stage 3. Inoperable. 3 months, maybe 4. Emma felt the world tilt slightly. I'm not telling you for sympathy, McCready continued. I'm telling you because if things go bad out there, I need you to understand that I'm not coming back either way. This is how I'm choosing to go out. Chief, Emma started, but McCready cut her off. Your dad saved my life in '91, McCready said. I've carried that for 30 years. Guilt. Why him and not me? Why did a good man with a family die so a broken-down bachelor could keep breathing? He looked at her, and for the first time Emma saw the weight he carried. The decades of violence. The friends buried. The choices that kept him awake at night. Then you showed up, McCready said. David's daughter, and I saw my chance to make it right, to finish what I started. I pulled strings to get you on this mission because I need to know that if I die out there, it means something. That I'm dying to save someone who matters. Emma's throat was tight. You don't owe my father anything, Chief. He made his choice. I owe him everything, McCready said. And now I'm asking you to let me pay that debt. You do your job out there. You survive, and you live for both of us. Can you do that? Emma looked at this man who had watched over her from the shadows for 15 years. This stranger who was the closest thing to a father she had left. Yes, sir, she said. I can do that. McCready nodded. Good. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Emma walked back to her barracks, but she knew sleep would not come. Her body understood what her mind was trying to deny. Something had changed in that conversation with McCready. The chief was dying, and he had chosen her, of all people, to be part of his last mission. The weight of that choice pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. She lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, watching the slow rotation of the fan overhead. Around her, the barracks was silent, except for the occasional creak of metal expanding in the cooling night air. Most of the other soldiers were deployed or on leave. She was alone with her thoughts, and her thoughts were not kind. She thought about her father's choice in the Kuwaiti desert 33 years ago. He had seen the Iraqi tank, had seen McCready's position, had done the math, and understood that someone was going to die. He could have stayed in cover, could have waited for air support or artillery, could have let someone else make the sacrifice, but he had not. He had grabbed that rocket launcher and run straight at death because that was what the job demanded. And David Keller had never walked away from the job. She thought about her grandfather, standing in the surf at Omaha Beach with bullets turning the water around him into geysers of white foam. He had been 19 years old, the same age Emma was when she enlisted. He could have frozen, could have drowned in 3 feet of water while machine guns stitched patterns across the sand. But he had not. He had moved forward step by step until he reached the seawall. And then he had kept moving forward for another 30 years, through France and Germany, through the frozen hell of Korea, carrying the weight of survival and the guilt of outliving better men. She thought about the promise she had made at her grandfather's grave, to make him proud, to be worthy of the legacy he left her. Words were easy. Living them was something else entirely. Emma got up and walked to her locker. Her movements were automatic, the ritual of preparation ingrained through years of training. She opened the locker door and looked at the items she kept there. The old rifle scope, scratched and worn, with her grandfather's initials carved into the housing. The photograph of her father, young and smiling, standing in front of a Humvee in the Kuwaiti desert weeks before the attack that killed him. And beneath them, folded with military precision, the flag from her grandfather's funeral. She took the scope and held it up to the light. The glass was cloudy with age, the metal warm from being in the closed locker. Her grandfather's hands had touched this metal. His eye had looked through this glass at German soldiers in pillboxes, at Chinese soldiers charging across frozen rivers. He had killed men with this scope, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. And each one of those men had been someone's father, someone's son, someone's grandfather. The weight of that knowledge should have been crushing, but Emma found it clarifying instead. Her grandfather had killed because the alternative was worse. He had killed so that men like her father could come home. And her father had died so that men like McCready could keep breathing. And now McCready was dying anyway, and he wanted to spend his last months in the fight instead of in a hospital bed, and he had chosen her to stand beside him when he did. The math was simple, brutal but simple. Emma mounted the scope on her SR-25. The rifle had been her father's once, before it was rebuilt for her smaller frame. The serial number on the receiver was the same one David Keller had carried in the Gulf War. She had fired thousands of rounds through this weapon. She knew its quirks, its tendencies, the exact point of impact at every range from 50 meters to 800. It was not just a tool, it was an inheritance, a physical link to the man who had died saving McCready's life. She ran her hand along the barrel, feeling the machining marks, the slight wear where the bipod attached. This rifle had killed before. It would kill again. And when it did, it would be Emma's hand on the trigger, Emma's eye behind the scope, Emma's decision to end a life. Not her father's ghost, not her grandfather's memory, hers. The responsibility of that settled on her shoulders, not heavy, just present, like the weight of her gear or the weight of the oath she had taken when she raised her right hand and swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Some weights you did not get to put down. You just learned to carry them. At 0200, Emma gave up on sleep entirely. She got up and checked her gear with the methodical attention to detail that her drill sergeants had beaten into her. Plate carrier, properly adjusted for her smaller frame. Magazines loaded to 28 rounds instead of 30 to prevent spring fatigue. Medical kit, inventory checked, hemostatic gauze and tourniquets within easy reach. Demo charges, carefully packed. Detonators separate, safety pins properly seated. The modified SR-25, cleaned and oiled until every moving part was perfect. She cycled the action, feeling the smooth mechanical precision of the bolt sliding home. Checked the scope mounting screws. Verified the zero using a bore sighter. Everything was exactly as it should be. She touched the old scope one more time, her grandfather's scope, now mounted on her rifle where it belonged. The initials carved into the housing looked back at her. R.K. Robert Keller, a man who had stormed beaches and frozen mountains, who had killed the enemies of freedom and lived long enough to teach his granddaughter how to do the same. "I'm ready, Granddad," Emma whispered to the empty barracks. "I hope I make you proud." The fan overhead continued its slow rotation. The night continued its slow march toward dawn, and Emma sat on her bunk, fully dressed, gear ready, waiting for the call that would send her to war beside a dying man who had promised her father he would keep her safe. The irony was not lost on her. But then again, nothing about this life had ever been what she expected. The interior of the MH-60 Blackhawk smelled like hydraulic fluid, sweat, and gun oil. Emma sat on the canvas bench seat, wedged between her oversized ruck and the bulkhead, watching the 5 SEALs perform their pre-mission rituals, checking weapons, testing comms, the quiet focus of professionals who had done this 100 times before. McCready sat across from her, eyes closed, breathing slow and controlled. If Emma had not known about the cancer, she never would have guessed. He looked like what he was, a weapon with 34 years of edge on it. The helicopter lifted and Syria dropped away beneath them. Dark desert, darker mountains. The moon was a thin crescent, just enough light to make the night vision goggles useful. 5 minutes out, the crew chief called over the intercom. The team stirred. Final checks. McCready opened his eyes and looked at Emma. He did not say anything, but she understood. This was it, the moment everything changed. The helicopter did not land. It hovered 6 feet above a rocky wadi, rotor wash creating a dust storm that turned the night opaque. The SEALs fast roped out, smooth and practiced. Emma went last, her hands burning on the rope, her boots hitting the ground with a jar that traveled up her spine. The helicopter pulled away immediately, and the silence rushed in behind it. Not true silence. The desert had its own sounds, wind over rock, distant dogs, the creak of her own gear as she took a knee and scanned her sector through night vision. Move, McCready's voice in her earpiece, barely a whisper. The team began the 3-kilometer hump to the target. For the SEALs, it was a tactical trot, weapons at the ready. Ready. Moving through the broken terrain like water finding the path of least resistance. For Emma, it was a sprint just to keep up. The physics of anatomy were cruel and immutable. McCready and Garrett stood over 6 feet tall, their natural stride covered a meter with every step. Emma, at 4'10", had to take nearly 2 steps for every one of theirs. The 50-pound ruck on her back felt like it was trying to drive her into the ground. The demo charges shifted with every step, throwing off her balance. Left foot, breathe, left foot, right foot. Don't fall behind. 10 minutes into the march, her quadriceps were burning. 20 minutes, and sweat was running down her back despite the cold. 30 minutes, and she could taste copper in the back of her throat. Gap on the rear, Garrett's voice crackled in her earpiece. Mouse, close it up. Mouse. The nickname had stuck since the briefing. She was too tired to care. Emma pushed harder, forcing her legs to move faster. The gap closed. Her heart hammered against her ribs like something trying to break free. The terrain got worse. Rubble from bombed-out buildings, rebar jutting from concrete like broken bones. The SEALs stepped over obstacles with ease. Emma had to climb, scramble, jump. Every extra motion cost energy she did not have. But she did not stop. Could not stop. Because somewhere in her mind she could hear her grandfather's voice. Pain is temporary. Quitting is permanent. They reached the outskirts of the pharmaceutical complex. The target building loomed against the stars, a dark monolith of concrete and broken glass. McCready raised a fist. The team halted. Emma took the opportunity to catch her breath, bent over with her hands on her knees, trying not to vomit. Davis, the sniper, moved to point position. He scanned the approach, his IR laser sweeping the debris field for threats. Then he signaled clear and moved forward. The team followed, weapons up, spacing tight. Emma brought up the rear, her SR-25 feeling heavier with every step. They approached a narrow alley between 2 collapsed buildings, a natural choke point. Davis moved through first, scanning high. Garrett followed, covering left. Reyes covered right. Emma was 10 meters back, watching the team move through the alley, when something caught her eye. A line, perfectly straight, cutting through the chaos of rubble at shin height. In the green phosphor glow of her night vision, the wire was almost invisible. Thin as a hair, painted matte gray to blend with the dust and concrete. But Emma's eye level was different from the men's. She was looking at the world from 4'10", and at that height, the wire stood out like a knife edge. It was strung 8 inches off the ground, too high to catch a boot, but exactly right to catch a knee, or a neck if you were crawling. Emma's brain processed the geometry in an instant. Davis had stepped over it without seeing it. Garrett was 3 steps from walking through it. If he did, the daisy chain IED connected to that wire would turn the entire alley into a kill zone. Freeze, Emma hissed into her mic. The word cut through the comms like a gunshot. The entire team locked up instantly, weapons snapping to the high ready. Keller, you better have a target. McCready's voice was a low growl in her ear. Emma did not answer. She moved forward, her movements careful, controlled. She slipped past Reyes and came up behind Garrett. He looked down at her, irritation written on his face. Why did we stop? Emma pointed. There. Garrett followed her finger and saw nothing. Then he adjusted his focus, looking lower, and finally he saw it. The wire, 8 inches off the ground, invisible to someone his height unless they knew to look. He followed the wire with his eyes. It ran from a rusted pipe on the left wall to a pile of bricks on the right. The bricks looked innocuous, just more rubble. But Emma knew better. The spacing was too regular, the arrangement too deliberate. Garrett knelt, moving his head lower to match Emma's sightline. From 4'10", the trap was obvious. Jesus, Garrett breathed. McCready moved up. What have we got? Emma pointed at the wire, then at the brick pile. Daisy chain IED. Probably 5 or 6 charges linked together. If the wire is disturbed, the whole alley goes up. Can we disarm it? McCready asked. Emma studied the setup. Not without an EOD tech, and that would take 20 minutes we don't have. Can we step over? Emma measured the wire height with her eyes. It's 8 inches high. You can clear it if you're careful. But if anyone trips, we all die, McCready finished. He looked at the team. Single file. Step over the wire at the 8-inch mark. Emma, you mark it. Emma pulled a small IR chem light from her kit and cracked it. She set it on the ground directly below the wire, creating a visual reference point that would show up bright green in their night vision. One by one, the SEALs stepped over the wire. Garrett first, his boot clearing it by 3 inches, then Reyes, then Davis, Hendricks. Each man moving with exaggerated care like they were walking a tightrope. McCready went last. He stopped before the wire and looked back at Emma. Good catch, Keller, he said quietly. Emma waited until he cleared the wire, then stepped over it herself. For her, the wire was at chest height. She did not even have to lift her foot. On the other side, Garrett was waiting. He looked at her differently now. Not with respect exactly, but something close to it. Lucky catch, kid, he said. Emma adjusted her rifle sling. Not luck, physics. I see what you don't because I'm down here. Garrett almost smiled. Then he turned and moved out. The team reformed and continued toward the target. Emma's legs were screaming, her lungs burning, but something had shifted. The SEALs still did not trust her, but they were starting to see her. And in this world, being seen was the first step to being valued. The pharmaceutical plant rose before them, 5 stories of Soviet brutalism. Windows like empty eye sockets, staring down at the desert. The smell hit them first. Chemical, sharp. The residue of whatever they had manufactured here before the war. McCready signaled a halt 50 meters out. The team went prone, observing. No sentries, Davis whispered. That's wrong. Could be abandoned, Reyes offered. Or it's a trap, Garrett said. Emma studied the building through her scope. The structure was exactly as the satellite photos had shown, but something felt off. The windows on the 4th floor were covered from the inside. Blackout curtains. Someone was trying very hard not to be seen. 4th floor is occupied, Emma said. Curtains on the windows. McCready nodded. Hendricks, your call. Lieutenant Commander Hendricks studied the building for another 30 seconds, then made his decision. We proceed as planned. Breach the main entrance. Clear floor by floor. Keller, you're on my 6. If we need demo, you make the call. The team moved in a tactical formation toward the main entrance. A rusted steel door, half off its hinges. Davis went through first, weapon up, scanning, clear. One by one, they flowed into the building. The main floor was a vast open space filled with dormant machinery, industrial looms and chemical vats, silent now, covered in dust. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something that made Emma's eyes water. Gas masks on, McCready ordered. This place manufactured sarin before ISIS took it. The team donned their masks, and the world became even more claustrophobic, breathing filtered and mechanical. They cleared the 1st floor methodically, room by room, corridor by corridor. No contact, no bodies, just empty spaces and the ghosts of industry. Too quiet, Garrett muttered. They reached the stairwell to the 2nd floor. Hendricks signaled a halt. Keller, is this structure safe? Emma looked at the walls, the ceiling, the support columns. Someone had been using this place for something. There were stress fractures in the concrete, blast damage on the load-bearing pillars from fighting that had happened years before. The building is unstable, Emma said. We need to move fast. If there's any more structural damage, the upper floors could collapse. Noted, Hendricks said. Double time, let's find this bastard and get out. They climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. Still nothing. 3rd floor, empty. The tension was building with every empty room, every silent corridor. The SEALs could feel it, the wrongness of it all. 4th floor. This was where the broker was supposed to be. They reached the office suite at the end of the hall. The door was closed but not locked. Hendricks stacked the team outside, Davis on point, Garrett and Reyes behind him, McCready and Emma in the rear. Hendricks raised 3 fingers. 2, 1. Davis kicked the door open and flowed inside. Clear left. Clear right, Garrett called. Emma stepped into the room and felt her stomach drop. It was empty. Just a desk, a chair, and a laptop sitting in the center of the desk, screen glowing. On the screen, a man's face. Gray beard, expensive suit, eyes like a snake watching a mouse. "Welcome, Americans," the face on the screen said in accented English. "You are so predictable." Then the world exploded. The shaped charges detonated simultaneously on 3 sides of the building. The sound was not loud. It was beyond loud. It was pressure, pure and physical, slamming into Emma's chest like a fist made of air. Her ribs compressed, her lungs emptied. For one terrible moment, she could not draw breath, could not force her diaphragm to move against the wall of overpressure that filled the room. The reinforced concrete walls absorbed the blast, channeling the force inward, turning the office suite into a compression chamber. This was demolition science weaponized. Someone had studied this building, understood its structure, calculated exactly how to turn its own strength against the people inside. Emma's world became chaos measured in fractions of seconds. The floor bucked beneath her feet, throwing her upward. The ceiling rained dust and fragments of acoustic tile, each piece tumbling in slow motion, illuminated by the emergency lights that flickered and died. The laptop on the desk exploded in a shower of sparks and plastic shrapnel, the lithium battery igniting in a brief star of white phosphorus heat. She felt herself lifted, weightless for a fraction of a second, suspended in the strange physics of explosive force. Her training tried to assert itself, tuck, roll, protect the head and neck. But her body was not listening. Her body belonged to Newton's laws now, and Newton did not care about survival. Then gravity remembered her and slammed her into the wall with force that drove the air from her lungs a second time. Her helmet cracked against concrete. The impact sang through her skull, bright and sharp. Stars exploded behind her eyes, white and gold and red. The world tilted sideways and refused to straighten, like she was standing on the deck of a ship in a storm. Through the ringing in her ears, through the high-pitched whine that would not stop, she heard voices, distant, distorted, like listening to someone shout underwater, the words reaching her as vibration more than sound. "Secondary charges," someone yelled. The voice was familiar, but Emma's brain could not attach a name to it. "Get out! Get out! Get—" The rest was swallowed by another detonation. This one was different, sharper, more focused. The blast wave hit from below, traveling up through the floor, and Emma felt the entire structure of the building shift. A groan of stressed concrete, the sound of something massive giving way to forces it was never designed to handle. Emma's training identified it automatically even as her brain struggled to process input. Breaching charge. They were blowing the stairwells, cutting off retreat, turning the building into a vertical coffin, sealed at every floor, nowhere to run but up. She tried to stand. Her legs did not want to cooperate. The connection between intention and action had been severed by the blast. Her nervous system scrambled, signals firing randomly. She got to her hands and knees, feeling broken glass and concrete fragments dig into her palms through her gloves. Tasted blood in her mouth. Must have bit her tongue when she hit the wall. The copper taste mixed with concrete dust, creating a paste that coated her teeth, her gums, the back of her throat. "Move, Keller!" The voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Close, familiar. Command voice. McCready. She looked up. The Master Chief was already on his feet, weapon up, scanning for threats through the smoke and dust. His face was cut, blood running from a gash above his left eye where his helmet had caught the edge of something sharp. But his hands were steady. 34 years of muscle memory overriding pain, overriding fear, overriding the cancer eating him from the inside. The office door had been blown off its hinges by the initial blast. It lay on the floor like a fallen soldier, twisted metal and splintered wood. Beyond it, the hallway was filling with smoke. Not the clean white smoke of pulverized concrete. Black smoke. Oily. Thick. The kind that came from burning plastic and rubber and things that were never meant to burn. The smell hit Emma's nose and her training screamed a warning. Chemical. Industrial. Wrong. "Gas!" she croaked. Her voice came out as a rasp, her throat raw from the dust. "They're using gas." McCready's head snapped toward her. His eyes found hers through the smoke, assessing, calculating. What kind? Emma's mind sorted through the possibilities. The smell was distinct, but her senses were compromised by the blast. She tried to place it. Not sweet like phosgene, not bleach like chlorine. Something else. Something that made her eyes water and her lungs rebel even before it reached her in concentration. She crawled closer to the door, drew a careful breath through her nose. The smell was stronger here. Rid, burning, and underneath it the distinct chemical tang of pool water left too long in the sun. "Chlorine," she said. "Maybe phosgene. Heavier than air. It'll sink to the lower floors and fill the building from the bottom up. We've got maybe 10 minutes before it reaches this level in lethal concentration." McCready keyed his radio. "All elements, this is Ironside. Building is compromised. Stairwells destroyed. They're pumping gas into the lower floors. We need to get to the roof now." Static answered him. Not the clean silence of a dead channel, but the active interference of a jammer. Someone was flooding the frequencies with white noise, ensuring that no calls for help would make it out of this building. Then a burst of noise that might have been words or might have been someone screaming. The audio cut off mid-transmission, replaced by more static. "Comms are jammed," Reyes said. He was crouched against the wall, blood streaming from his nose where the blast pressure had ruptured vessels. The tech specialist's hands moved across his radio with automatic precision, adjusting frequencies, cycling through channels, trying to find any gap in the jamming. But his face said what his voice did not. They were cut off, isolated, alone. McCready processed this information in the time it took most men to blink. He had been in bad situations before, had been pinned down in Mogadishu when the helicopters fell, had called in danger close artillery in the Korangal Valley with Taliban fighters 50 meters away, had learned decades ago that panic was a luxury that professional soldiers could not afford. "Hendricks," he called. "LT, sound off." Silence. McCready turned, saw the lieutenant commander lying on his back near the desk where the laptop had been, saw the unnatural angle of his neck, saw the piece of rebar 4 feet long and half an inch thick that had punched through the wall during the explosion and caught Hendricks in the throat. The lieutenant commander's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, but they did not see anything anymore. The rebar had severed his carotid artery and his trachea simultaneously. He had bled out in seconds, drowning in his own blood before anyone could reach him, before anyone could apply pressure or call for a medic or do any of the things training said you were supposed to do when a man went down. Emma forced herself to look away, forced herself to count. This was triage. This was mathematics. The living had priority over the dead because the living could still complete the mission. McCready, Reyes, Garrett, Davis, 4 SEALs, and her. 5 people trapped on the 4th floor of a building that was rapidly becoming a gas chamber. 5 people who needed to find a way out before the chlorine reached them, before the building collapsed, before the enemy fighters storming up from below found them and finished what the gas started. The sound of gunfire echoed from somewhere below. Heavy machine gun fire. The deep, rhythmic hammering of a Soviet-era DSHK. 50 caliber rounds designed to punch through armored vehicles, now being used to shred the concrete stairwell wreckage, to make sure no one tried to escape that way, to seal the Americans in their tomb. "Keller," McCready snapped, "is there another way to the roof?" Emma's mind raced through the building schematics she had memorized. The main stairs were destroyed. The external fire escapes would be covered by snipers. That left only one option. "The ventilation system," she said. "There's a main trunk line that runs from the basement to the roof. If we can access it, we can climb." "Where's the access point?" McCready demanded. Emma tried to remember. The schematics had shown maintenance hatches on every floor, but the exact locations. She closed her eyes, visualizing the blueprint. 2nd floor, southwest corner. There's a mechanical room, should have a hatch into the main duct. "That's 2 floors down," Garrett said. "Through a building full of hostiles, pumping chlorine gas up from the basement." "You got a better idea?" McCready asked. Garrett did not. McCready made the decision. "We moved to the 2nd floor. Fast and quiet. Keller, you're on point. You know the layout better than anyone. Garrett, Davis, rear security. Reyes, you're with me. We lose anyone, we don't stop. Understood?" The men nodded. Emma stood, testing her legs. The world still tilted slightly. but she could walk. She checked her rifle. The SR-25 had survived the blast, but the scope was cracked. A spider web of fracture lines ran across the glass. She could still see through it, barely, but her long-range accuracy was gone. Doesn't matter, she thought. In a building, everything is close range anyway. McCready moved to the door and peered into the smoke-filled hallway. Hand signals. 2 fingers pointing left, 3 fingers pointing right. The universal language of violence. Emma moved up beside him. The hallway stretched in both directions, disappearing into the smoke. The air was getting thicker. Her eyes were starting to water. Southwest corner is that way, she whispered, pointing right. McCready nodded. Stack up. They formed a line. Emma at point, McCready behind her, Reyes third, Garrett and Davis bringing up the rear. 5 people who had been strangers 12 hours ago, now bound together by the simple fact that they would live or die as a unit. Emma stepped into the hallway. The smoke embraced her, thick and choking. Even through her gas mask, she could taste the chemicals. Chlorine had a distinct flavor. Swimming pools and bleach. The smell of clean things turned into weapons. She moved forward, rifle up, sweeping corners. The hallway was lined with doors. Office spaces, storage rooms, all of them closed. Behind any one of them could be an enemy fighter with an AK-47 waiting for them to pass. But they did not have time for room clearing. The gas was rising. Emma could see it now, a visible haze creeping up from the stairwell at the end of the hall. Yellow-green, thick as fog. It moved like it was alive, flowing along the floor, seeking the lowest points, filling the building the way water fills a sinking ship. She reached an intersection, looked left, clear, looked right. A body sprawled in the hallway. One of the enemy fighters killed by the initial blast. His weapon lay beside him. Emma kept moving. Behind her, she heard McCready cough, a wet, rattling sound that went on too long, the cancer eating his lungs, aggravated by the chemical air. But when she glanced back, his weapon was still up, his movement still controlled. They reached the stairwell, or what was left of it. The shaped charges had done their job well. The concrete stairs were now a pile of broken rubble, impassable. The air here was thick with gas, a yellow-green cloud that burned Emma's eyes even through the mask. Can't go down, Garrett said. His voice was muffled by his gas mask, turned mechanical and inhuman. There, Emma said, pointing across the rubble field. On the far side of the destroyed stairwell, barely visible through the smoke, was a doorway. Maintenance access. According to the schematics, it led to a secondary corridor that ran along the outside of the building. We have to cross that, McCready said, studying the rubble. Unsupported, unstable. If it shifts while we're on it, we die here or we die there, Emma interrupted. At least there gives us a chance. McCready looked at her. For a moment, she saw something in his eyes, not fear. SEALs did not do fear, but acknowledgement, recognition that they were making choices now that had only one outcome. The only question was how much it would cost to get there. One at a time, McCready ordered. Spread the weight, Keller, you first. You're the lightest. Emma slung her rifle and started across the rubble. Each step was a negotiation with gravity and luck. The broken concrete shifted under her boots. Rebar jutted out at random angles, waiting to catch a foot, to twist an ankle, to send her tumbling down into the gas-filled basement below. Halfway across, a chunk of concrete the size of her head broke free and fell. She watched it drop, tumbling in slow motion, until it disappeared into the yellow-green fog below. She did not hear it hit bottom. She kept moving, one foot, then the other, weight distributed, balance maintained. The decades her grandfather spent teaching her to move through broken terrain, to trust her footing, to understand that in combat, hesitation kills faster than bullets. She reached the far side and turned. Safe. Cross. Reyes came next, then Davis, then Garrett. Each man moving with the careful precision of someone who understood that the margin for error was measured in inches. McCready came last. He was halfway across when the coughing started again. Not just a cough this time, a full convulsion that doubled him over, one hand pressed to his chest, the other reaching out for balance that was not there. The rubble shifted under him. A grinding sound, the physics of collapse starting their inevitable work. Chief, Garrett shouted, move! McCready tried, but his body betrayed him. The coughing would not stop. Blood sprayed the inside of his gas mask, painting the lens red. The rubble was sliding now. Concrete blocks grinding against each other. searching for a new equilibrium that would send everything tumbling down. Emma did not think. She dropped her rifle and ran back onto the unstable surface. Her light weight was an advantage now. She moved fast, staying ahead of the collapse, reaching McCready just as his knees buckled. She grabbed his vest with both hands and pulled. He was twice her weight, all muscle and bone and too many years of carrying heavy things. But fear and adrenaline are multipliers, and Emma Keller had both in abundance. She dragged him forward. 1 step. 2. The rubble was avalanching now, sliding down into the white cloud below. 3 steps. 4. Garrett reached out and grabbed McCready's other arm. Together, they hauled him across the last few feet and onto solid ground. McCready collapsed against the wall, ripping his gas mask off, coughing blood onto the concrete. His face was gray. His lips tinged blue. The tumor in his chest was winning its war. Emma knelt beside him. "Chief, we need to move." McCready waved her off. "Give me." He could not finish the sentence. The coughing took him again. Garrett looked at Emma. His eyes said what his mouth did not. McCready was dying. Maybe not today, maybe not this hour, but soon. And every minute they spent in this building brought that moment closer. "We can't stay here," Reyes said. He was watching the stairwell, watching the boss rise. It was on the 4th floor now, spreading along the ceiling like an inverted flood. Emma made a decision. She grabbed McCready's face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. "You promised my father you'd look after me. Well, I'm looking after you now. Get up, Chief. That's an order." Something sparked in McCready's eyes. Not quite anger, not quite amusement, but something close to respect. He nodded, pushed himself upright, put his gas mask back on. "Let's move," he rasped. They went through the maintenance door into a narrow corridor. The walls here were bare concrete, stained with decades of water damage and neglect. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, running on emergency power, casting everything in a strobing uncertainty. Emma checked her mental map. The mechanical room should be 50 meters ahead, on the left. If the schematics were right. If the building had not been modified. If they had not already died and this was just the long moment between the bullet and the realization that it had found its mark. The corridor ended at a heavy steel door. Stenciled letters, faded and barely legible. Mechanical. Authorized personnel only. Garrett tried the handle. Locked. "Stand back," Emma said. She pulled a strip of dead cord from her demo kit and pressed it against the lock mechanism. The others retreated around the corner. Emma triggered the charge. The explosion was sharp and confined. The door blew inward, hanging from twisted hinges. They flowed into the mechanical room. It was exactly as the schematics had shown. 20 feet by 20 feet, dominated by a massive HVAC unit that must have dated back to when the building was first constructed. Ductwork ran in every direction, disappearing into the walls and ceiling. And there, on the far wall, half hidden behind the air handler, was a maintenance hatch. 16 inches by 20 inches. Just barely large enough for a man to squeeze through. Garrett walked over to it and measured with his eyes. Then he looked at his shoulders. Then at the hatch. "I can't fit," he said flatly. Davis moved up, studied the opening. "Neither can I." Reyes tried to wedge his shoulders in, got halfway and stuck. He pulled back out, shaking his head. Too tight. They all looked at McCready. The Master Chief was the biggest man in the room. If the others could not fit, he had no chance. Then they looked at Emma. She stared at the hatch, at the dark square opening that led into the building's circulatory system, at the only path that led up instead of down. "How far to the roof?" McCready asked. 2 floors, Emma said. "Straight vertical climb in the main trunk, then a lateral run on the 5th floor to the roof access ladder. Can you make it?" Emma thought about the narrow ductwork, the confined space, the absolute darkness. The fact that if she got stuck, there would be no rescue. She would just die there, wedged in steel, alone in the dark. "Yes," she said. McCready pulled off his gas mask. His face was still gray, but his eyes were clear. "Listen to me, Keller. You get to the roof, you signal for exfil. You don't wait for us. You get on that helicopter and you get out. Understood? What about you? We'll find another way. Or we won't. But you don't die because of us." "Chief, I'm not leaving." "That's an order," McCready interrupted. "Your father died saving people. I've spent 30 years trying to be worth that sacrifice. Don't you dare waste your life trying to save mine." Emma wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that leaving them was the same as killing them. But she saw the look in his eyes and knew that arguing would cost time they did not have. She pulled off her plate carrier, stripped down to her base layer and chest rig, kept her sidearm and one magazine, left the heavy gear behind. The SR-25 would not fit in the duct. She looked at her father's rifle, the weapon she had carried for 4 years, and felt like she was abandoning a piece of herself. McCready saw her hesitation. He picked up the rifle and slung it across his own back. "I'll keep it safe," he said. "You just come back and get it." Emma nodded. She turned to the hatch and looked into the darkness beyond. "Good luck, Mouse," Garrett said. It was the first time the nickname sounded like respect instead of mockery. Emma did not reply. She grabbed the edge of the hatch and pulled herself into the steel throat of the building. The world narrowed to a square tunnel of galvanized metal and absolute darkness. Emma's shoulders scraped the sides of the duct. Her hips barely cleared. This was not crawling. This was swimming through solid space, using her elbows and toes to drag herself forward inch by agonizing inch. She counted the movement. Pull with elbows. Push with toes. 1, pull, push. 2, pull, push. 3. The numbers kept her sane, kept her from thinking about the walls pressing in, about the fact that behind her, the only way out was getting smaller with every foot she advanced. 10 feet in, the ambient light from the mechanical room died. The darkness became total. Emma's world reduced to sound and touch. The rasp of her breath, the scrape of fabric on metal, the distant thump of her heart beating against the steel floor of the duct. 20 feet in, she found the main vertical shaft. It opened above her like a chimney, a dark throat stretching up into nothingness. She tilted her head back and could see nothing. Just black upon black upon black. Emma reached up and found a seam where 2 sections of duct joined. The rivets gave her finger holds. Barely. She wedged her back against one wall and her boots against the opposite wall, creating a friction lock. Then she began to climb. The technique was called chimneying. Rock climbers used it to ascend narrow crevasses. It required constant pressure, constant tension. If she relaxed for even a second, she would slide back down. 1 foot up, lock. Other foot up, lock. Push with the back. Slide up 6 inches, repeat. Her quadriceps began to burn within the first minute. Within 2 minutes, they were screaming. But Emma had learned a long time ago that muscles could scream. The question was whether you listened. She did not listen. She climbed. Somewhere below, muffled by steel and distance, she heard gunfire, long bursts, the distinctive rattle of AK-47s. McCready and the team had made contact. Emma wanted to go back, wanted to help, but the duct was too narrow to turn around. Forward was the only direction that existed anymore. 10 feet up the shaft, her water pouch snagged on a bracket jutting from the wall. The strap pulled tight across her chest, arresting her climb. Emma tried to reach back and free it, but the angle was impossible. She could not get her hands behind her body without losing her friction lock. She hung there, suspended, feeling her leg muscles quiver with the strain of holding position. She could cut the pouch loose, but it held 2 liters of water. In the Syrian heat, 2 liters meant the difference between functional and hallucinating. Emma made the calculation. Survival now versus survival later. Mission first. Always mission first. She reached for the knife on her shoulder strap and cut the water pouch free. It fell, bouncing off the walls of the shaft, the sound of it receding like a coin dropped down a well. She never heard it hit bottom. Her lips were already dry. Would be worse in an hour. Would be critical in 3. Doesn't matter, she thought, just climb. She resumed the ascent. 15 feet, 20 feet. Her arms joined her legs in rebellion. The burns spread from her muscles into her bones, into the spaces between her bones, until her entire body was one unified field of pain. 25 feet. The shaft opened onto a lateral duct. 2nd floor. Emma pulled herself into the horizontal space and collapsed, gasping, every muscle twitching with exhaustion. She allowed herself 10 seconds of rest. Counted them out. 1, 2, 3. At 7, she heard something that made her forget about 8, 9, and 10. Voices, speaking Arabic. Close, very close. Emma froze. She was lying on top of a ventilation grill. She could see down through the slats into a room below. It was filled with men, weapons on tables, maps on walls, a staging area. She counted 12 fighters, all of them armed. One of them, clearly in command, was speaking into a radio. "The Americans are trapped on 4, he said in Arabic. "The gas will drive them out. When they emerge, kill them all. No prisoners." Emma's Arabic was functional, learned in a classroom at the Defense Language Institute, but good enough to understand the death sentence being pronounced on McCready and the others. She needed to warn them. She keyed her radio, praying the signal would punch through the steel. Ironside, this is Mouse, she whispered. Enemy staging area directly below you. 12 plus hostiles. They know your position. Static answered her. The steel walls were a Faraday cage, blocking the transmission. Emma was on her own, and McCready was about to walk into an ambush. She studied the room below through the grill. The fighters were focused on the radio transmission, on their maps, on their plans to kill the Americans. Not one of them looked up. Emma did the math. 12 targets, 1 magazine in her sidearm, 15 rounds. She had shot expert on the pistol range, but that was stationary targets at 25 meters. This would be moving targets through a steel grill at a 30-degree angle in a room filled with people shooting back. The odds were not good, but the alternative was watching McCready die. Emma drew her sidearm, checked the chamber, 1 round ready, 14 in reserve. She sighted through the grill, picking her first target. The commander, the one with the radio, cut off the head and the body flails. She took a breath, let half of it out, found the stillness at the bottom of her lungs where fear could not reach. And then Emma Keller, daughter of warriors, granddaughter of heroes, made a choice that would define the rest of her life. She squeezed the trigger. The sound of the gunshot in the enclosed duct was beyond deafening. It was a physical assault, a pressure wave that felt like it might rupture her eardrums. But Emma did not stop to register the pain. The commander dropped, the radio flying from his hand. Emma shifted aim. Second target, third, fourth. The pistol barked in her hand, each shot precisely placed, each bullet threading the gaps in the steel mesh. By the 5th shot, the fighters below had located her. Muzzle flashes lit up the room as they poured fire at the ceiling. Bullets punched through the sheet metal around Emma, creating constellations of light, turning her hiding place into a sieve. She kept firing. 6th shot, 7th. Men were falling, but not fast enough. Not nearly fast enough. Her pistol locked back empty. 15 rounds, 7 men down, 5 still standing. And all 5 of them were shooting at the place where she had been half a second before. Emma rolled sideways as the duct beneath her disintegrated under concentrated automatic weapons fire. She felt something hot slice across her left calf. A bullet or a piece of shrapnel. Did not matter which. Blood, hot and wet, soaked into her boot. She ejected the empty magazine, reloaded her last one. 15 more rounds, 5 targets. The math was better now, but the duct was coming apart around her, and she had nowhere to go. A section of sheet metal tore free completely, creating a jagged hole 2 feet wide. Emma looked down and saw the fighters looking up, their weapons tracking toward her position. She did not think. She dropped through the hole. 10 feet. She hit the floor rolling, landed in a crouch, pistol up. The 5 remaining fighters stared at her. This tiny woman who had just fallen from the ceiling like some kind of demon. For one frozen heartbeat, no one moved. Then everyone moved at once. Emma fired. 2 rounds, center mass into the nearest fighter. He went down. She pivoted, fired. The second fighter took one to the head. The third fighter's AK came up, finger tightening on the trigger. Emma dove left as the weapon roared. Bullets chewed up the floor where she had been standing. She came up firing. 1 round caught the fighter in the hip, spinning him. The second caught him in the neck. 2 left. Her pistol slide locked back, empty. The remaining fighters rushed her. No time to reload. No time to run. Emma dropped the pistol and grabbed the knife from her shoulder rig. 6 inches of steel, designed for cutting paracord and opening MREs, about to be used for something else entirely. The first fighter swung his rifle like a club. Emma ducked under it, stepped inside his guard, and drove the knife up under his ribs. She felt it scrape bone, felt the resistance of muscle and lung, felt the wet heat of blood pouring over her hand. She twisted the blade and ripped it free. The fighter collapsed, choking on his own blood. The last man raised his hands. Surrender, the universal gesture that transcended language and culture and conflict. Emma looked at him, saw his face. Young, maybe 20, beard still patchy, eyes wide with fear. He was wearing a wedding ring. The metal caught the light from the overhead fixture that somehow still worked despite the battle raging around them. She remembered McCready's words from the briefing. No prisoners. This was not a capture mission. This was direct action. Eliminate the threat. Complete the objective. Get out alive. She remembered the radio transmission she had overheard. Kill them all. The commander giving orders to slaughter McCready and his team without mercy, without hesitation, without quarter. She remembered her father, 23 years old, bleeding out in a Kuwaiti field hospital because he had chosen to save others instead of saving himself. Because he had run toward danger instead of away from it, because that was what service demanded. Emma Keller stood in a room filled with bodies, covered in blood that was not her own, holding a knife that dripped red onto the floor, and she made her choice. She stepped forward. The young fighter's eyes went wide. He said something in Arabic, fast, desperate, probably begging, probably invoking God or family or mercy. Emma did not speak Arabic well enough to understand the words, but she understood the tone, the sound of a man who knew he was about to die and was trying to find some combination of syllables that would change that outcome. She raised the knife, not in anger, not in hatred, with the cold mechanical precision of someone who had calculated the cost of mercy and found it too expensive. 5 Americans trapped in this building, 12 enemy fighters in this room. If she let this one live, he would grab a weapon the moment her back was turned. He would kill her, or he would call for reinforcements, or he would do any of a dozen things that would result in McCready dying. The math was simple: his life or theirs. And Emma Keller had already chosen which equation she was solving. She drove the knife forward. The young fighter tried to block. His hands came up in a futile gesture of defense. The blade punched through his palm, through the wedding ring that would now go home to a widow, and continued into his throat. Emma felt the resistance of cartilage, felt the blade sever the windpipe and the carotid artery in one efficient thrust. She pulled the knife free and stepped back. The fighter collapsed, both hands pressed to his throat, blood pulsing between his fingers in rhythmic spurts timed to his failing heartbeat. His eyes found hers, held them, accused them. Emma watched him die, did not look away. This was the price, and she would not dishonor it by pretending she had not paid it. When the light went out of his eyes, when the blood stopped pulsing and started pooling, Emma turned away. She picked up her pistol from where she had dropped it, reloaded with mechanical efficiency, grabbed an AK-47 from one of the dead fighters and slung it across her back. Extra ammunition, extra options. Her left calf was bleeding where the bullet or shrapnel had cut her during the firefight. She could feel blood squelching in her boot with every step. She ignored it. Triage. Stop the bleeding that would kill you in minutes. Ignore the bleeding that would kill you in hours. She cinched her belt around her thigh above the wound, using it as a hasty tourniquet. The room was silent now except for the distant sound of gunfire from other parts of the building. Emma looked at the 12 bodies. 12 men who had woken up this morning, who had eaten breakfast, who had checked their weapons and said whatever prayers their faith demanded before going to war. Now they were meat, cooling, stiffening, becoming nothing. Emma felt nothing. No guilt, no triumph, no horror, just the empty clarity that comes after violence. When the adrenaline starts to fade and you realize you are still alive, and you are not sure if that is a victory or a failure. She keyed her radio. Ironside, this is Mouse. Second floor staging area is clear. 12 enemy KIA. You have a path to the mechanical room if you can reach the southwest corridor. Static answered her. The steel walls were still blocking transmission, or McCready was dead and there was no one left to answer. Emma refused to consider the second option. She had to believe he was alive, had to believe the mission was still viable, because the alternative was accepting that she was alone in a hostile building with no extraction, no support, and no way out except the way she came in. She looked at the ventilation grill she had shot through. The duct beyond it was torn apart by gunfire, impassable. She would have to find another route to continue climbing. Emma searched the room, found a door marked with Arabic script. She could not read the words, but the pictogram was universal. Stairs. She opened the door carefully, weapon up, scanning for threats. The stairwell was narrow and dark, emergency lighting casting everything in a sickly red glow. It spiraled upward, concrete steps worn smooth by decades of use. Emma started climbing. Each step sent pain lancing through her injured calf, but she pushed through it. 3rd floor, 4th floor, 5th floor, the top. She reached a landing, a heavy steel door with a push bar. Beyond it, if the schematics were accurate, was the roof access. Emma paused, listened, heard nothing beyond the door. She pushed it open and stepped out into the Syrian night. The roof was a flat expanse of tar and gravel, dotted with HVAC units and satellite dishes. The sky above was clear, stars brilliant in the absence of light pollution. The same stars her grandfather had seen over Normandy, the same stars her father had seen over Kuwait. Emma moved to the edge and looked down. 5 stories to the ground. The courtyard below was filled with enemy fighters. She counted at least 30, maybe more. They were setting up heavy weapons, positioning for a siege. They knew the Americans were trapped inside and they were content to wait. She pulled out her signal mirror, found the direction of the extraction point based on her mental map, started flashing the agreed-upon code. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. The oldest distress signal in the world. She flashed it toward the horizon, toward the empty desert where the extraction helicopter should be waiting, and she prayed that someone was watching, that someone would see, that someone would come. Minutes passed. Emma kept signaling, kept flashing the mirror at the darkness, kept hoping. Then, distant but growing louder, he heard the sound that meant salvation or death, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors, getting closer. The enemy fighters heard it too. They started shouting, pointing at the sky, swinging their weapons toward the approaching sound. Emma ran to the center of the roof, pulled a chem light from her kit and cracked it. Green glow. She held it above her head, marking the landing zone, making herself a beacon. The helicopter came in fast and low. An MH-60 Blackhawk, running dark, no lights except the brief flicker of instrument panels through the windscreen. The pilot flared hard, the aircraft shuddering as it fought to shed velocity and altitude simultaneously. The side door gunner opened up with the minigun. The sound was incredible, a sustained roar that drowned out everything else. Tracers arced down into the courtyard, turning the clustered enemy fighters into red mist and screaming. The helicopter touched down, barely. The skids kissed the roof for a fraction of a second. The crew chief was screaming at her, "Get in! Get in!" Emma ran toward the aircraft, 10 feet, 5 feet. Behind her, the roof access door exploded outward. McCready stumbled through, supporting Garrett, who was bleeding from a leg wound. Reyes and Davis were right behind them, firing back through the doorway at pursuing enemy fighters. "Move, move, move!" McCready roared. They sprinted for the helicopter. Emma reached it first, dove through the open door. Reyes and Davis followed. McCready and Garrett brought up the rear, McCready firing one-handed while dragging Garrett with the other arm. They tumbled into the cabin. The crew chief was already pulling the door shut. "Go, go, go!" McCready shouted to the pilot. The helicopter lifted. Bullets sparked off the armored underside. An RPG whooshed past, missing by inches. The pilot banked hard, the rotors clawing at the air, fighting for altitude and speed. The rotors. Emma lay on the deck, gasping, feeling the vibration of the engine through the metal floor. She was alive. They were alive against every odd, against every reasonable expectation. They had survived. She looked across the cabin. McCready was slumped against the bulkhead, his face gray, blood on his lips from another coughing fit. Garrett was holding pressure on his leg wound. Reyes and Davis looked shell-shocked, eyes distant, processing trauma in real time. They had lost Hendricks, had barely made it out alive, had completed no part of the mission except survival. But they were alive, and sometimes in war, that was the only victory that mattered. The helicopter banked toward the extraction point, toward safety and toward home, and Emma closed her eyes and let the exhaustion take her, knowing that when she woke up, she would have to face what she had done in that room, what she had become in those moments when the knife had found flesh. But that was a problem for later. For now, she was content to be alive, to feel the helicopter carrying her away from death, to exist in the space between one breath and the next. The Master Chief's voice cut through her thoughts. Quiet, tired, but unmistakably his. "Good work, Mouse. Your father would be proud." Emma opened her eyes and looked at him. Saw the respect there, the acknowledgement, the thing she had been seeking since her grandfather's grave. "Thank you, Chief," she whispered. And in that moment, suspended between earth and sky, between war and peace, between the person she had been and the person she had become, Emma Keller understood that she had crossed a threshold that could never be uncrossed. She was no longer the girl who stood at her father's funeral without crying. She was no longer the specialist trying to prove she belonged. She was a weapon, honed, tested, proven. And the war was just beginning. The Black Hawk touched down at Forward Operating Base Copperhead 30 minutes before dawn. The eastern horizon was beginning to lighten, that pale gray that comes before true sunrise, when the world exists in a state between darkness and day. Emma stumbled off the helicopter on legs that barely remembered how to walk. Her calf wound had stopped bleeding, but every step sent fresh pain radiating up through her knee and hip. The medical team was waiting. They descended on the survivors like a tactical unit themselves. Practiced hands checking vitals, assessing injuries, calling out triage codes. Emma found herself being guided toward an ambulance, a corpsman shining a light in her eyes, asking her questions she could not quite process. "What's your name? Can you tell me where you are? Do you know what day it is?" Emma answered on autopilot while her mind was still in that building, still climbing through steel passages, still driving a knife into the throat of a man who had tried to surrender. The corpsman wrapped her calf, started an IV line, kept talking in that calm, professional voice that medical personnel use when they are worried but do not want to show it. Across the landing pad, she saw McCready being loaded onto a stretcher. He was fighting it, trying to wave off the medics, insisting he could walk. But his legs gave out halfway to the medical tent, and 3 corpsmen had to catch him before he hit the ground. Blood soaked through his uniform, not from a wound, from his lungs, the cancer winning its war one cell at a time. Emma tried to go to him, but her own corpsman held her back. "You need treatment, ma'am. That leg wound needs proper cleaning and stitches." "I need to see the chief," Emma said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears, like she was listening to someone else speak. "You need to let us do our job," the corpsman said firmly. "The chief is being taken care of. You will be too. Now sit down before you fall down." Emma sat, not because she was following orders, but because her body simply stopped cooperating. The adrenaline that had carried her through the mission was gone now, burned away, leaving nothing but exhaustion so profound it felt like gravity had doubled. They cleaned her wound. It was not as bad as the blood had suggested. A deep laceration, but no major vessels hit, no bone involvement. The corpsman irrigated it with saline that burned like liquid fire, then sutured it closed with quick, efficient stitches, while Emma stared at the ceiling of the medical tent and tried not to think about the young fighter's face as the light went out of his eyes. 12 stitches, antibiotics, tetanus booster, pain medication that she refused because she needed to stay sharp, needed to maintain clarity, needed to not feel the chemical numbness that came with opioids. "You should rest," the corpsman said after he finished bandaging the wound. "You're showing signs of shock, dehydration, possible concussion from that blast exposure." "I'm fine," Emma said. The lie came easily, automatic, the same lie soldiers had been telling medics since war was invented. The corpsman looked at her with eyes that said he had heard that lie 1,000 times before and never believed it once. He handed her a bottle of water. "Drink this, all of it. And if you start feeling dizzy or nauseous, you come back here immediately." Emma took the water and drank. It tasted like plastic and chemicals, but her body absorbed it desperately, cells crying out for hydration after hours of exertion and heat and bleeding. She drained the entire bottle in less than a minute. The corpsman gave her another, and another after that. By the 4th bottle, her head was starting to clear, the fog lifting, reality reasserting itself in sharp, uncomfortable detail. She was sitting in a medical tent at a forward operating base in Syria. She had just survived a mission that killed 1 American and at least 17 enemy fighters. She had climbed through ventilation shafts, engaged in a firefight while hanging from a ceiling duct, dropped into a room full of hostiles, and killed the last one with a knife while he begged for mercy. And now she was expected to write a report, to debrief, to explain in clinical military language exactly how she had become a killer. Specialist Keller. The voice came from the tent entrance. Emma looked up to see a man in his 40s wearing the insignia of a full colonel. Behind him stood 2 officers she did not recognize, and a woman in civilian clothes carrying a tablet computer. "Sir," Emma started to stand, but the colonel waved her back down. "Stay seated, Specialist. I'm Colonel Morrison, JSOC Liaison. This is Major Chen from Army Intelligence and Lieutenant Harris from JAG. And this is Ms. Ramirez from the Defense Intelligence Agency. We need to debrief you on what happened in that building." Emma looked at the 4 faces staring at her with the kind of clinical assessment usually reserved for equipment inspections or autopsy reports. Saw the calculation in their eyes, the careful weighing of value against liability. They were trying to decide if she was a hero or a problem, an asset or a loose end that needed to be tied off. "Where's Master Chief McCready?" Emma asked. Her voice came out steady despite the exhaustion threatening to drag her under. "He's in surgery," Colonel Morrison said. "The medical team is trying to drain fluid from his lungs." The blast exposure and chemical inhalation aggravated his underlying conditions significantly. "He's stable for now, but critical." "For now, stable. The medical euphemisms for dying slowly. The words hung in the air like a death sentence written in administrative language, bureaucratic and cold. "What's his prognosis?" Emma pressed. Morrison's expression flickered. Just briefly. A moment of humanity beneath the professional mask. "He has stage 3 lung cancer, specialist. This mission didn't cause it, but it accelerated the timeline. The doctors are giving him days, maybe a week if he's strong." "I'm sorry." Emma absorbed that information the way she had been trained to absorb incoming fire. Acknowledge it, process it, keep moving. She could fall apart later, in private, when falling apart would not compromise the mission or her standing or the tenuous respect she had earned through blood. "We need your account of the mission," the colonel continued. His voice was gentle but firm, the voice of someone who had done this many times before, who knew how to extract information from traumatized soldiers without breaking them completely. "Start from the breach and take us through to extraction. Don't leave anything out. Even details that seem minor might be operationally significant." Emma took a breath, organized her thoughts into the chronological structure that after-action reports demanded, and began to talk. She told them about the laptop playing the video message, about the face of the broker on the screen, his accented English pronouncing their doom with the casual certainty of someone who held all the cards, about the shaped charges that detonated with mathematical precision, turning the office suite into a compression chamber designed to kill through overpressure alone. She told them about the ceiling raining debris, about being thrown into the wall hard enough to see stars, about Hendricks lying on his back with a piece of rebar through his throat, eyes open and seeing nothing, dying before anyone could apply pressure or call for a corpsman or do any of the things that training said were supposed to save lives. She told them about the chlorine gas, about McCready making the tactical decision to send her into the ventilation system because she was the only one small enough to fit, the only asset that physics had not disqualified from the only escape route available. She told them about the climb, about the darkness so complete it felt like being buried alive, about cutting her water loose and leaving it wedged in a bracket because mission success outweighed personal survival, about pushing through pain and exhaustion and the primitive screaming fear of confined spaces because stopping meant dying, and dying meant McCready and his team died too. The four interrogators leaned forward slightly when she got to the staging area. This was what they really wanted to know, not the tactics, not the environmental factors. They wanted to understand the violence, wanted to assess whether Emma Keller was a soldier who had done what the situation required, or a liability who might crack under scrutiny, who might become a problem that needed congressional hearings and damage control. Emma told them about firing through the ventilation grill, about the nightmare angles and the need to thread bullets through steel mesh while hanging from a ceiling duct, about killing the commander with the radio, about engaging multiple targets while enemy fire turned her hiding place into scrap metal. She told them about her pistol jamming, about dropping through the hole into the room because there was nowhere else to go, about the close quarters fight where physics and training collided with desperation and will. And then she got to the part where she had to explain how she killed a man who was trying to surrender. The silence in the tent became absolute. Even the ambient noise of the bass seemed to fade. The world narrowed to these 5 people and the weight of judgment about to be rendered. Lieutenant Harris, the JAG officer, spoke first. His voice was carefully neutral, the studied tone of someone building a legal case. "You killed a man who had surrendered, a man with his hands up in a clear gesture of non-combatant status. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice and the Geneva Conventions, that constitutes a war crime." Emma met his eyes, did not look away, did not blink. "I killed an enemy combatant in a hostile building during active combat operations. He was armed, his weapon was within reach, and I had received explicit orders of no prisoners from my commanding officer immediately prior to the mission." "Those orders don't supersede the laws of war," Harris said. His face was impassive, but his hands had tightened on his notepad. "The Geneva Conventions are clear about treatment of prisoners who have laid down their arms and demonstrated intent to surrender. Summary execution is prohibited under any circumstances. The Geneva Conventions assume you have the ability to secure and transport prisoners," Emma said. Each word came out measured, deliberate. She had thought about this moment during the helicopter flight back, had run through the legal and moral arguments, had tried to find language that would make them understand. "I was alone, wounded. in a building full of hostiles pumping chemical weapons through the ventilation system. I had no restraints, no backup, no secure location to hold a prisoner. Taking him into custody would have required me to disarm him, secure him, and maintain physical control while navigating back to my team through enemy territory. She paused. Let that sink in. The tactical reality is that securing him would have compromised the mission and endangered the lives of 5 American service members who were depending on me to complete my objective. I made a split-second decision based on immediate threat assessment, available resources, and mission priorities. If you want to court-martial me for doing my job, sir, then do it. But don't pretend this was murder. It was combat. It was war. And in war, when you have to choose between saving your brothers or following a legal framework designed for different circumstances, you save your brothers. Harris started to respond, but Colonel Morrison held up a hand. That's enough, Lieutenant. This isn't a tribunal. We're gathering facts for the operational report, not making accusations or determining legal culpability at this stage. He turned his attention fully to Emma. His eyes were shrewd, assessing, but not unkind. Specialist Keller, you should know that Master Chief McCready's preliminary report, filed from his hospital bed before surgery, corroborates your account in every particular. He states explicitly that without your actions, his team would not have survived. The enemy had them pinned with superior numbers, pre-positioned kill zones, and chemical weapons. Your flanking maneuver and elimination of the staging area broke the ambush and allowed them to reach the extraction point. Morrison pulled a document from his folder. Additionally, signals intelligence recovered from the building shows that the enemy commander had given explicit orders to execute any American prisoners. They were not planning to offer quarter, and we are not required to extend it when doing so would endanger our personnel. Emma said nothing, just waited. Let them make their decision. Morrison continued, JSOC is recommending you for the Silver Star for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States. Your actions were above and beyond the call of duty by any reasonable standard. You saved American lives under extreme circumstances while demonstrating exceptional courage and tactical skill. The words should have meant something, should have felt like validation, but Emma just felt tired. Permission to speak freely, sir? She asked. Granted. I don't want to meddle, Emma said. I want to know if we got the broker. Did the mission accomplish anything, or did Lieutenant Commander Hendricks die for nothing? Morrison's expression darkened. The broker was not in the building. The intelligence was either faulty or he was tipped off before we arrived. The entire operation was a setup designed to kill or capture American Special Operations personnel. So Hendricks died for nothing, Emma said. It was not a question. Hendricks died doing his duty, Morrison said. As did you, as did all of you. The fact that the intelligence was bad doesn't diminish the courage shown by everyone on that team. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to scream that courage meant nothing if the mission failed, if good men died chasing ghosts, if the enemy knew they were coming and turned their objective into a killing floor. But she was too tired, too empty. Am I dismissed, sir? She asked. Morrison studied her for a long moment. Get some rest, specialist. We'll need a full written report within 48 hours. And I'm ordering you to meet with the combat stress counselor. That's not optional. Yes, sir, Emma said. She stood. Her leg protested but held. She walked out of the tent into the pale dawn light and found herself with nowhere to go. Her barracks were on the other side of the base. Her gear was still on the helicopter or scattered across Syria. She was wearing a borrowed uniform because her own was soaked in blood. Emma walked. No destination in mind, just movement. Putting one foot in front of the other because that was what you did when standing still meant thinking about things you did not want to think about. She found herself at the base chapel, a small prefabricated building with a simple wooden cross mounted above the door. Emma had never been particularly religious. Her grandfather had been a Christmas and Easter Christian. Her father had believed in God but never talked about it. Emma had grown up with faith as background noise rather than conviction. But now she pushed open the chapel door and stepped inside. The interior was simple, rows of folding chairs facing a small altar, a book on a podium, quiet, empty. The kind of space that invited contemplation whether you wanted it or not. Emma sat in the back row and stared at the cross. Tried to pray, could not find the words. What did you say to God after killing 12 men? After driving a knife into someone who was begging for mercy? After choosing mission over morality? I did what I had to do, she thought, but the words felt hollow. She sat there as the sun rose fully, as the heat of the day began to build, as the base around her came to life with the sounds of vehicles and voices and the mundane machinery of war. She sat until her legs started to stiffen, until the pain medication wore off and the wound began to throb with a deeper ache. And then Senior Chief Garrett found her. He stood in the chapel doorway, backlit by the morning sun, a silhouette that might have been menacing if Emma had not recognized the shape of him. He walked down the aisle and sat in the chair next to her without asking permission. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Garrett broke the silence. "I've been doing this for 22 years, he said. His voice was rough, tired. "I've killed more people than I can count. Insurgents in Iraq, Taliban in Afghanistan, Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Guys who were trying to kill me, guys who were trying to kill my brothers. Some of them were armed, some of them weren't. Some of them saw me coming. Some of them never knew what hit them." He paused, looked at the cross. "And every single one of them haunts me," he continued. "Not all the time, not every day. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I see their faces. I remember which ones begged, which ones cursed, which ones just looked surprised that their time was up." Emma did not know what to say to that. "The guy in the room," Garrett said. "The one who surrendered, you did the right thing." "Did I?" Emma asked. Garrett turned to look at her. "You think letting him live was the moral choice? He would have grabbed a weapon the second you turned your back, or he would have called for backup, or he would have slowed you down long enough for the gas to reach that level. Any of those outcomes gets you killed, gets the chief killed, gets all of us killed." "That doesn't make it right," Emma said. "No," Garrett agreed. "It doesn't. War isn't about right and wrong. It's about the least bad choice in a situation where all the choices are terrible. You made the call that kept your team alive. That's the job. That's what we do." "And the fact that it feels wrong," Emma asked, "means you're still human," Garrett said. "The day it stops bothering you is the day you need to turn in your weapon and go home. Because that's the day you stop being a soldier and become something else." Emma absorbed that, let it settle. "The chief wants to see you," Garrett said. "When you're ready. Medical is keeping him sedated, but he's been asking for you every time he wakes up." "How is he?" Emma asked. "Dying," Garrett said bluntly. "The doctors give him maybe a week, maybe less. The mission accelerated things. The blast, the gout, the exertion, his body is shutting down." Emma felt something crack in her chest. A week. McCready had maybe a week left, and he had spent part of it making sure she survived. "He knew," Garrett continued. "Before we went in, he knew this would probably kill him. And he went anyway, because that's who he is. He doesn't know how to quit, doesn't know how to stop being a warrior, even when his body is falling apart." "I should have stayed with him," Emma said. "Should have found another way." "There was no other way," Garrett said. "You were the only one who could fit in those ducks, the only one who could make that climb. The chief knew that. That's why he sent you. Not because he wanted to get rid of you, because he trusted you to do what needed to be done." Emma looked at her hands. They were clean now. The corpsman had scrubbed away the blood. But she could still feel it, still feel the wet heat of it pouring over her fingers as the knife found flesh. "Does it get easier?" she asked quietly. "No," Garrett said. "It gets familiar. You learn to live with it. You learn to carry it, but it never gets easier." He stood, checked his watch. "I need to get to the debriefing. You should get some rest. Real rest. Not sitting in a chapel torturing yourself." "Chief," Emma said. Garrett turned back. "Thank you." He nodded once, sharp, final, then walked out into the sunlight. Emma sat alone in the chapel for another hour. Then she went to see McCready. The medical tent was divided into sections by hanging curtains. Emma found McCready in the critical care area, hooked up to monitors that beeped and hummed with electronic life. An oxygen line ran to his nose. IV bags hung from poles, dripping clear fluids into his veins. His skin was gray, his breathing labored, but his eyes were open. "Mouse," he said when he saw her. His voice was barely a whisper. Emma pulled a chair close to his bed. "Hey, Chief, you look like hell." McCready tried to laugh. It turned into a cough that racked his entire body. Blood flecked his lips. When the spasm passed, he looked at her with eyes that were too bright, burning with fever or determination, or the last reserves of a man refusing to die quietly. "We made it out," he said. "We made it out," Emma confirmed. "Hendricks?" "Didn't make it," Emma said. "KIA in the initial blast." McCready closed his eyes. "Good man, had a wife." 2 kids. I know, Emma said. They sat in silence for a moment. The monitors beeped. The oxygen hissed. Outside the tent, the base went about its business, indifferent to the small tragedy unfolding in this curtained space. Your dad, McCready said suddenly. When he died, did they tell you what he said? At the end, Emma shook her head. They said he died in surgery, that he never regained consciousness. That's not true, McCready said. He was awake for almost 2 hours after we pulled him out. Kept asking about you, about your mom. Made me promise to look after you both if he didn't make it. Emma felt tears building behind her eyes. She forced them back. He said something else too, McCready continued. Said he wasn't scared of dying. That death was easy. Living with the choices you make, that's the hard part. He said he could die knowing he made the right choice. That saving his brothers was worth whatever it cost. McCready opened his eyes again. Looked at Emma with an intensity that seemed impossible for a man so close to death. You made the right choice in that building, he said. The man who surrendered. You did what you had to do, and I don't want you carrying that like it's a sin. It's not. It's the price, and some of us are asked to pay it so others don't have to. How do you live with it? Emma asked. All these years, all those choices. You find something worth protecting, McCready said. Something worth the bind. For your dad, it was his brothers, his family. For me, it was making sure his sacrifice meant something. For you, it'll be whatever you decide is worth carrying that weight. He coughed again, harder this time. A nurse rushed over, but McCready waved her off. Listen to me, he said to Emma. His hand found hers, gripped it with surprising strength. You're going to be fine. You're stronger than you know, tougher than you look, and you've got something most soldiers never find. What's that? Emma asked. Purpose, McCready said. You're not fighting because someone told you to. You're fighting because it's who you are, because the Kellers serve, because that's the legacy your grandfather and your father left you. His grip loosened. His breathing became more labored. The nurse stepped forward. He needs to rest. You should go. Emma stood, but McCready's hand tightened on hers again. One more thing, he whispered. Your dad's rifle, the SR-25. I had it sent to the armory. It's yours. I added something to it. Check the stock. What did you add? Emma asked. McCready smiled. A ghost of his usual self, something to remember me by. The nurse was insistent now. Emma let go of McCready's hand and stepped back. Rest, Chief, she said. I'll see you tomorrow. McCready's eyes were already closing. His voice faded to barely audible. Semper Fi, Mouse. Emma left the tent, walked across the base to the armory. The master sergeant on duty was expecting her. He pulled out a hard case and opened it on the counter. Inside was her father's rifle. The SR-25 she had carried for 4 years, customized for her frame, zeroed to her eye, as much a part of her as her own hands. She lifted it out, felt the familiar weight, and then she saw what McCready had added. On the stock, freshly engraved, were 3 sets of initials. R.K. Robert Keller, her grandfather. D.K. David Keller, her father. And below them, newly cut into the wood, J.M. James McCready. 3 generations. 3 warriors. All of them marked on this weapon. All of them part of the legacy she now carried. Emma ran her fingers over the letters, felt the depth of the engraving, the permanence of it. The master sergeant cleared his throat. There's also this, ma'am. He handed her an envelope. Emma opened it. Inside was a single page, handwritten in McCready's distinctive scrawl. Mouse, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or close to it. Either way, these are probably the last words I'll get to say to you, so pay attention. You asked me once why I watched over you all these years, why I pulled strings to get you into advanced courses, why I recommended you for this mission. The truth is simple. I owed your father a debt. He gave his life so I could keep mine. That's not a debt you ever finished paying. But it's more than that now. Somewhere along the way, you stopped being David's daughter and became your own person, a warrior in your own right. And I've watched you grow into someone your father and grandfather would be proud of. The rifle is yours. I added my initials not because I think I belong with those other names. I don't. They were better men than I'll ever be. But I wanted you to remember that you're not alone in this, that you're part of a chain that goes back further than you know and will continue long after you're gone. The choices you made in that building, the things you had to do, those are on me as much as they are on you. I gave the orders. I put you in that position. And I'd do it again because you saved lives that needed saving. Don't let the weight of this break you. Carry it. Let it make you stronger. Let it remind you why we do this. Not because we love war, but because we love the people who can't fight for themselves. Your dad told me once that the hardest part of being a soldier isn't the dying. It's the living after. It's waking up every day and choosing to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep believing that what we do matters. Keep going, Emma. Keep fighting. Keep believing. And remember, you're not just a Keller anymore. You're a warrior who has proven herself in the fire. You've earned your place. Now go and do something worthy of these initials on your rifle. Semper Fi, Master Chief James McCready. Emma read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. She picked up the rifle, slung it over her shoulder, walked out of the armory into the blazing Syrian afternoon. Somewhere in the distance, artillery fired. The war continued. The enemy regrouped. The mission cycle reset. And Emma Keller, daughter of warriors, granddaughter of heroes, keeper of a legacy written in blood and sacrifice, walked toward whatever came next with her head up and her eyes clear. The girl who had stood at her father's funeral without crying was gone. In her place stood a weapon, forged in fire, tempered by violence, ready for war. McCready died 3 days later. Not in combat, not in some dramatic final firefight where he could go out the way warriors were supposed to go out, weapon in hand and enemies falling before him. He died in a hospital bed, in a field medical facility that smelled of antiseptic and slow death, with morphine finally claiming the pain he had refused to acknowledge for so long. Emma was there when it happened. She had been there for all 3 days, leaving his bedside only for brief intervals to eat or sleep or pretend to shower. She sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside his bed, holding his hand when he was conscious enough to know she was there, reading aloud when he drifted into the morphine haze that blurred the line between sleep and unconsciousness. She was reading from a worn paperback copy of Gates of Fire that someone had left in the waiting area. The pages were dog-eared and the spine was cracked from multiple readings. She had found it on a table and brought it to McCready's bedside because it seemed appropriate. A book about warriors, about men who chose to stand and die rather than run and live, about Spartans at Thermopylae making their final stand against impossible odds. Emma was reading about King Leonidas inspecting his 300, about the casual way they combed their hair and prepared for death, when McCready's breathing changed. She stopped reading, set the book down on her lap, watched his chest rise and fall with increasing difficulty. The intervals between breaths grew longer. Each exhalation seemed like it might be the last. The rasp that had been constant for days grew quieter, softer, fading like a radio signal moving out of range. "Chief," Emma said quietly, her hand tightened on his. "You still with me?" McCready's eyes flickered open. They were clouded with pain and drugs, but still aware, still present. He looked at her, and something like a smile touched his lips. "Still here," he whispered. His voice was barely audible over the hiss of the oxygen line. "Stubborn. Can't seem to let go." "You don't have to let go," Emma said. "Fight it. You're tough. You can beat this." McCready's smile became more pronounced. "Now you're lying. Bad at it too." Emma felt tears building behind her eyes. She forced them back. Warriors did not cry. Soldiers did not break down. But her throat was tight and her vision was blurring, and she was discovering that there was a difference between the discipline required for combat and the discipline required to watch someone you cared about die by inches. "Okay," she admitted, "you're right. I'm lying. But I needed to say it anyway." "I know," McCready said. His breathing was getting worse, more labored. Each word cost him effort that he could not afford but spent anyway. "Listen, need to tell you." "You should rest," Emma said. "Save your strength." "For what?" McCready asked. The question might have been bitter, but his tone was just tired. Resigned, the tone of someone who had made peace with inevitability. "I'm dying, Mouse, we both know it. Let me say this." Emma nodded, squeezed his hand. "Your father," McCready said, "when he died, they told you he never woke up, that he died on the operating table." Emma nodded again. "That's what they said." "They lied," McCready said, "to protect you, to protect your mother." He was awake for almost 2 hours after we pulled him out. Kept asking about you, about your mom. Made me promise to look after you both. The tears were coming now. Emma could not stop them. They ran down her face silently while McCready kept talking, kept forcing words through a body that was shutting down system by system. He wasn't scared, McCready continued. Wasn't afraid of dying. Said death was easy. Living with the choices. That's the hard part. He said he could die knowing he made the right choice, that saving his brothers was worth whatever it cost. McCready's eyes found Emma's, held them with an intensity that seemed impossible for a man whose body was failing. You made the right choice, he said. The man who surrendered, you did what you had to do, and I don't want you carrying that like it's a sin. It's not. It's the price, some of us. Some of us are asked to pay it so others don't have to. How do you live with it? Emma asked. The question came out broken, raw. All these years, all those choices, how do you keep going? You find something, McCready said. Something worth protecting, worth the Kate for your dad. It was his brothers, his family. For me, it was making sure his sacrifice meant something. For you, it'll be whatever. Whatever you decide is worth carrying that weight. He coughed. The sound was wet and terrible. Blood flecked his lips. The monitor above his bed started beeping faster, irregular. The nurse who had been hovering nearby moved closer, but Emma waved her back. Not yet. Not yet. Listen, McCready said. His hand gripped Emma's with surprising strength. The last reserves of a man refusing to go quietly. You're going to be fine. Stronger than you know, tougher than you look, and you've got something most soldiers never find. What's that? Emma asked through her tears. Purpose, McCready said. The word came out clear. Definite. You're not fighting because someone told you to. You're fighting because it's who you are, because the Kellers serve, because that's the legacy your father, left you. His grip loosened. His eyes started to close. The nurse stepped forward. He needs to rest now. You should go. Emma stood, but McCready's hand found hers again, held it weakly. One more thing, he whispered. His voice was fading, going distant. Your dad's rifle, the SR-25. I had it sent to the armory, checked the stock, added something to remember me by. What did you add? Emma asked. She leaned close to hear. McCready's eyes were closing now. The morphine or the death or both pulling him under. But he smiled, a ghost of his usual self, one last flash of the warrior he had been. Something to remember me by, he repeated. Then his eyes closed fully. His breathing became a rattle, a rasp, a whisper. Rest, Chief, Emma said. Her voice broke on the words. I'll see you tomorrow. But she knew there would be no tomorrow. Not for McCready, not for this. His breathing continued for another hour, becoming shallower, quieter, more sporadic. Emma sat beside him, holding his hand, watching the monitors track the slow failure of a body that had survived 3 decades of combat, only to be defeated by its own cells turning traitor. Between one breath and the next, between one paragraph of Gates of Fire and the absence of another, Master Chief Warrant Officer James McCready stopped breathing. The monitor flatlined, a single sustained tone that cut through the medical tent like a knife. The nurse rushed over, checked for a pulse, found none, looked at Emma with practiced sympathy. I'm sorry, she said, he's gone. Emma sat there for a long moment, still holding McCready's hand, still staring at his face, waiting for some sign that this was not real, that he would wake up coughing and cursing and refusing to die like he had refused everything else he did not want to accept. But he did not wake up. His face was still, peaceful in a way it had never been in life. The pain finally gone, the war finally over. Emma released his hand gently, stood on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, walked to the tent entrance and found Garrett waiting outside. He had been there for the last 6 hours, keeping vigil in his own way. He's gone, Emma said. Garrett nodded. His face was stone, but his eyes were wet. I know, could hear the monitor from out here. They stood together in the Syrian night. The base around them continued its rhythm, indifferent, uncaring. The machinery of war did not stop for individual deaths. Could not stop, would not stop. I'll make the notifications, Garrett said quietly. Call his sister. Get the paperwork started. You should get some rest. Emma shook her head. I need to go to the armory. He said he left something for me. Now? Garrett asked. Now, Emma confirmed. Garrett studied her face, saw something there that made him nod. All right, I'll walk with you. They crossed the base in silence. 2 warriors processing grief in the only way they knew how. By moving forward, by completing the mission, by refusing to stop even when stopping seemed like the only sane response to an insane world. The armory was closed, but Garrett had the access codes. He opened the secure room and found Emma's weapon case where McCready had said it would be, pulled it out, set it on the counter. Emma opened the case. The SR-25 lay there, cleaned and oiled, perfect in every detail. She lifted it out carefully, felt the familiar weight, the balance that came from years of customization and use. And then she saw what McCready had added to the stock. 3 sets of initials, engraved into the wood with professional precision, deep enough to last forever. R.K. Robert Keller, her grandfather who had stormed beaches and frozen mountains, who had taught her that size did not matter, only discipline and will. D.K. David Keller, her father who had run toward death so others could live, who had made a choice in the Kuwaiti desert that echoed down through decades. And below them, newly cut into the wood in letters that matched the others exactly. J.M. James McCready, the man who had spent 30 years trying to repay a debt, who had watched over her from the shadows, who had given her this final gift of belonging. 3 generations, 3 warriors, all of them marked on this weapon, all of them part of the legacy she now carried. Emma ran her fingers over the letters, felt the depth of the engraving, the permanence of it, the weight of what it meant. Garrett was watching her. "There's also this," he said quietly. He handed her an envelope that had been in the case beneath the rifle. Emma opened it with hands that trembled slightly. Inside was a single page, handwritten in McCready's distinctive scrawl. The letters were shaky in places, the work of a dying man forcing his hand to obey long enough to leave final words. The funeral was held at the base chapel. Full military honors, flag-draped coffin, 3 volleys of rifle fire that echoed across the compound, taps played by a Marine bugler whose notes cracked on the high ones because even professional warriors were not immune to grief. The team was there. Garrett, Reyes, Davis, others from SEAL Team 7 who had served with McCready over the years, men with gray hair and scarred faces who stood at attention while one of their own was laid to rest. The chaplain spoke about sacrifice, about duty, about a life spent in service to something larger than self. The words were true but insufficient. How did you summarize 34 years of violence and courage and quiet heroism in a 10-minute eulogy? When they folded the flag and presented it to McCready's sister, when the rifles fired and the bugler played, when the coffin was loaded onto a transport that would carry his body back to Arlington, Emma stood at attention and felt something fundamental shift inside her. This was the cost, this was the price that freedom demanded. Good men dying far from home, families receiving flags instead of fathers, husbands, brothers, soldiers carrying the weight of survival when better men did not. And somewhere, somehow, it had to mean something. After the ceremony, Garrett approached her. "The colonel wants to see you," he said. "In the TOC, now." Emma followed him to the Tactical Operations Center. Inside, Colonel Morrison was waiting with the same group from the debriefing. But this time, their faces held different expressions. Not judgment, calculation. "Specialist Keller," Morrison said. "Before he died, Master Chief McCready filed a formal recommendation. He's requesting that you be permanently attached to JSOC for future operations." Emma said nothing, waited. Morrison continued. "That recommendation has been approved. Effective immediately, you're being transferred from regular Army to JSOC. You'll be working with various special operations units as a specialized operator. Your size, your skills, your performance on this last mission, all of it makes you uniquely valuable." "What kind of operations?" Emma asked. "The kind we can't talk about in detail," Morrison said. "High-value targets, surgical strikes, situations where conventional operators can't do the job. You'll be trained, equipped, and deployed as needed." He paused. "This isn't an order, specialist, it's an offer. You can decline and return to your regular unit. No one will think less of you. But if you accept, you need to understand what you're signing up for. More missions like the last one. More impossible situations. More hard choices." Emma thought about the rifle in the armory, about 3 sets of initials carved into the wood, about McCready's letter and her father's sacrifice, and her grandfather's wars. She thought about the young fighter's face as the knife found his throat, about the weight of that choice and the knowledge that there would be more choices like it. And she thought about purpose, about finding something worth the cost. "When do I start?" Emma asked. Colonel Morrison smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who recognized a fellow traveler on a hard road. "Report to Dam Neck in 72 hours, he said. "Welcome to the shadows, Specialist Keller." Emma saluted, turned to leave. One more thing, Morrison called after her. The call sign mouse doesn't work anymore. You need something that fits who you've become. What did you have in mind, sir? Morrison looked at the file on his desk, at the after-action reports, at the body count from a single soldier who fit where others could not. Ghost, he said, because they never see you coming until it's too late. Emma considered that, nodded. Ghost it is, sir. She walked out of the TOC into the Syrian heat. The base around her continued its rhythm, helicopters landing and taking off, convoys rolling through the gates, the endless machinery of war grinding forward. And Emma Keller, now Ghost, newly minted member of America's Special Operations Community, walked toward her barracks to pack her gear and prepare for whatever came next. The legacy was hers now, the weight, the purpose, the cost, and she would carry it forward into the dark places where monsters lived and warriors hunted them. Because that was what Kellers did. They served. 6 months passed like a fever dream. Emma Keller disappeared into the shadows of Joint Special Operations Command and emerged as something else entirely. Something harder. Something that moved through the dark places of the world with the silent efficiency of a predator that had learned to hunt without mercy. Dam Neck, Fort Bragg, undisclosed locations in 3 continents. The training was relentless, advanced marksmanship until she could put rounds through playing cards at 800 meters. Close quarters combat until her hands became weapons as lethal as any blade. Explosive entry, tactical medicine, languages, surveillance. The complete toolkit of modern warfare compressed into 6 months of 18-hour days and dreams filled with blood. She learned to fast rope from helicopters in zero visibility, learned to navigate by stars when GPS failed, learned 50 ways to kill a man quietly and 100 ways to disappear into crowds or wilderness or the spaces between buildings where normal people never looked. But more than tactics, she learned patience. The kind of patience that lets you lie motionless in a hide site for 3 days waiting for a target to appear. The kind that lets you watch an enemy through a scope, learning his patterns, understanding his routines, until the moment comes when his life intersects with your mission and the equation resolves itself in blood. The instructors were ghosts themselves, men whose names appeared in no database, whose faces were unknown to the public, who had spent decades doing work that would never be acknowledged. They looked at Emma with the clinical assessment of craftsmen examining a new tool, measuring, testing, searching for weaknesses that could be exploited or eliminated. She gave them nothing to find. Her performance was flawless. Not because she was naturally gifted, though her grandfather's genes and her father's legacy had given her advantages, but because she had learned something in that Syrian building. Something that McCready had taught her with his final breaths. Purpose was everything, and her purpose was to be worthy of the 3 sets of initials carved into her rifle stock. The SR-25 went everywhere with her, to the range, to the field exercises, to the briefings where targets were discussed in the antiseptic language of intelligence assessments and political considerations. The weapon had become an extension of herself. She knew its quirks better than she knew her own heartbeat, knew exactly how wind and humidity and temperature affected its ballistics, knew that at 400 meters in a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind, she needed to hold 3 inches left, knew that the trigger broke at exactly 3.2 pounds of pressure. And every time she looked at the stock, at those 3 sets of initials worn smooth by her hands, she felt the weight of what she carried. Not just the rifle, but the legacy, the debt, the promise she had made to McCready in his final moments. Live for both of us. She was trying. God knew she was trying. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early autumn. Emma was on the range, working through a cold bore drill, when Garrett appeared at the firing line. He waited until she had finished her string, until the last brass casing had clinked to the ground, before speaking. "We've got a mission," he said. "Wheels up in 4 hours, full briefing in 30 minutes. Bring your kit." Emma safed her weapon and stood. "What's the target?" Garrett's expression was grim. "The broker. We found him." The briefing room was crowded with people Emma had never seen before and might never see again. Intelligence analysts, drone pilots, communications specialists, a full mission package assembled from across the special operations community. At the head of the table stood Colonel Morrison. He looked older than Emma remembered. The lines on his face had deepened. The gray in his hair had spread. "Good afternoon," he began without preamble. 6 months ago, SEAL Team 7 conducted a direct action mission in Syria targeting a high-value individual known as the Broker. That mission resulted in 1 KIA and multiple wounded. The target was not present. Intelligence indicates the operation was compromised before insertion. Morrison clicked a remote. A photograph appeared on the screen. The face Emma had seen on that laptop screen. Ibrahim al-Nazari, the Broker. Older now, grayer, but unmistakably the same man. Since that operation, we've been tracking the Broker through multiple intelligence channels. SIGINT, HUMINT, financial transactions. He's been moving constantly. Syria, Iraq, Turkey, never staying in one place long enough for us to develop actionable intelligence. Another click. A compound appeared on the screen. High walls, guard towers, somewhere remote and fortified. 3 days ago, we received confirmation that the Broker is meeting with representatives from a Chechen separatist group. The meeting is taking place here, a private estate in the mountains of northern Iraq, 40 kilometers from the Turkish border. The compound is owned by a Kurdish businessman with ties to multiple militant organizations. Morrison paused. Let that information settle. The meeting is happening in 72 hours. Our intelligence indicates this is a weapons transaction. Chemical weapons. Specifically 4 canisters of VX nerve agent stolen from Syrian government stockpiles. The Broker is brokering the sale to the Chechens, who plan to use it in attacks on civilian targets in Russia and potentially Europe. Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. VX was not like chlorine gas. VX was designer death. A single drop on skin could kill in minutes. A canister released in a subway or a shopping mall could kill thousands. The political situation is complicated, Morrison continued. We cannot officially operate in this region without Iraqi government approval, which we will not receive. This is an off-the-books direct action. No support, no backup. If something goes wrong, the United States government will deny all knowledge of this operation. He looked around the room. Each face was impassive. This was not new information. Everyone here had done work that officially never happened. The compound has approximately 20 armed guards, mix of Kurdish militia and foreign fighters. The meeting itself will include the Broker, 3 Chechen representatives, and the Kurdish businessman who owns the property. The chemical weapons will be stored in a basement vault beneath the main house. Morrison clicked. Again, a floor plan appeared. The estate consists of 3 buildings: main house, guest quarters, garage, and maintenance building. All 3 are connected by underground passages. The basement vault is here, beneath the main house, accessible only through a reinforced steel door with biometric locks. Emma studied the layout. Something was bothering her, but she could not identify what. The primary objective is to eliminate the Broker and the Chechen representatives. Secondary objective is to secure or destroy the chemical weapons. Tertiary objective is to gather any intelligence materials present. Questions? A hand went up. One of the operators Emma did not recognize. What's the exfil plan? Turkish border is 40 kilometers north, Morrison said. You'll move overland to a pre-positioned vehicle cache. From there, you cross into Turkey and link up with a CIA liaison who will facilitate your return. That's a long walk, the operator said. Through hostile territory. In the dark. Correct, Morrison said, which is why the team composition for this mission is small and highly specialized. This is not a direct assault. This is surgical. Get in. Complete objectives. Get out. Minimal footprint. Maximum effect. He clicked the remote again. A roster appeared. Team leader. Senior Chief Wade Garrett. Breacher in heavy weapons. Petty Officer Carlos Reyes. Technical Specialist in Communications. Petty Officer Michael Davis. And our primary shooter. Specialist Emma Keller, call sign Ghost. Emma felt every eye in the room turn toward her. The analysts, the support personnel, the other operators who had not made the cut. She kept her face neutral, professional, but inside something was screaming. 4 people against 20 guards in a fortified compound with chemical weapons in the basement and 40 kilometers of enemy territory between the target and safety. The math was not good. The math was borderline suicidal. But then again, the math had never been good. Not in Syria, not in any of the missions that mattered. Good men did impossible things because someone had to do them, and they were the ones who volunteered. Morrison was still talking. Insertion will be via halo jump from 30,000 feet. You'll exit the aircraft over Turkish airspace and glide to the drop zone here, 5 kilometers from the target. From there, you move on foot to the objective. Each hour is 0300 local time. That gives you 4 hours of darkness to complete the mission and move to the vehicle cache. He paused, looked directly at Emma. Specialist Keller, you'll be the primary long gun. Your position will be here, on a ridge 800 meters from the compound. You'll provide overwatch during the assault and engage any targets of opportunity. The broker is your primary responsibility. If he attempts to flee, you take him down. Understood? Yes, sir, Emma said. Good. Garrett, your team has 3 hours to prep and manifest. Aircraft departs at 1800. Any other questions? There were none. Or if there were, no one asked them. Because asking meant acknowledging doubt, and doubt was a luxury that got people killed. The briefing broke up. Emma gathered her notes and headed for the door, but Garrett caught her arm. Walk with me, he said. They went outside into the autumn afternoon. The air was cool, clean. A few leaves were starting to turn. It felt surreal. In 72 hours, Emma would be lying on a mountainside in Iraq, looking through a scope at a man she was about to kill. But right now, the world looked almost peaceful. You okay with this? Garrett asked. I'm fine, Emma said automatically. Garrett stopped walking, turned to face her. I'm not asking if you're mission capable. I know you are. I'm asking if you're okay. Because this is the guy, the one who set up the ambush that killed Hendricks, the one who turned that building into a death trap, the one McCready spent his last months hunting. I know who he is, Emma said. And? Garrett pressed. And I'm going to put a bullet in his head, Emma said. Her voice was flat. Matter of fact, the same tone she used to discuss wind correction or ammunition selection. He's just another target, another set of crosshairs, another equation to solve. Garrett studied her face for a long moment. That's what I'm worried about, he said quietly. What do you mean? I mean that 6 months ago you came back from Syria carrying weight, guilt about the men you killed, questions about whether you made the right choices. Now you talk about human beings like they're mathematical problems. That worries me. You told me it gets familiar, Emma said, that you learn to carry it. I also told you that the day it stops bothering you is the day you need to quit, Garrett said. I'm not seeing much bother in you right now, Ghost. I'm seeing cold. And cold is useful in the field. But cold is also how you lose yourself. Emma met his eyes. What do you want me to say, Chief? That I'm torn up about killing the man who murdered Hendricks? That I'm losing sleep over putting down someone who sells chemical weapons to terrorists? I'm not. And if that makes me cold, then maybe cold is what the mission requires. Maybe, Garrett said. Or maybe you're using the mission as an excuse not to feel anything at all. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but somewhere deep down, in a place she had been trying to ignore for 6 months, she knew he was right. She had wrapped herself in professionalism and competence and the language of tactics because feeling anything else was too painful, too complicated, too human. I'll do my job, she said finally. That's all that matters. Your job is to come back alive, Garrett said. Not just your body, your soul too. McCready asked you to live for both of you. I don't think he meant live as a machine. He walked away before Emma could respond. She stood there for a long moment watching him go, feeling something crack in the armor she had built around herself over the past 6 months. Then she pushed it down, locked it away. There would be time for introspection after the mission. Right now, she had work to do. The next 3 hours were a blur of preparation. Emma packed her kit with the methodical precision of someone who had done it 100 times. Plate carrier, magazines, medical supplies, optics, the SR-25, cleaned and zeroed, wrapped in a protective case. Every item had a place. Every ounce of weight was calculated and justified. She checked her gear 3 times. Then she checked it again. Not because she doubted herself, but because perfection was the only acceptable standard when lives depended on your performance. At 17:30, the team manifested at the aircraft. A C-130 Hercules painted in civilian colors, registration numbers that trace back to a shell corporation that did not officially exist. The loadmaster was Air Force Special Operations. He looked at the 4 operators in their minimal gear and shook his head. Light package, he observed. You boys planning to take over a country or just visit? Just visiting, Garrett said. We'll be polite. The loadmaster grunted. Suit yourselves. We'll be at altitude in 90 minutes. Depressurization starts at Angels 30. Exit window is 60 seconds. Don't miss it. They loaded their gear and settled into the nylon seats that lined the aircraft fuselage. The engine spooled up. The cargo ramp closed. The plane began to taxi. Emma closed her eyes and ran through the mission profile in her head. Free fall from 30,000 feet. Pull at 5,000. Glide to the landing zone. 5-kilometer movement to the objective. Take position on the ridge. Wait for H-hour. Engage targets as they appear. Ensure the broker does not escape. 800 meters. Cold bore shot. First round hit. The kind of pressure that would break most shooters. She had made harder shots in training, but training targets did not shoot back. Training targets did not have 20 armed guards and chemical weapons and the ability to kill thousands if you failed. No pressure, she thought. Just another day at the office. The flight was long and cold. The aircraft climbed to altitude, and the temperature inside the fuselage dropped until Emma could see her breath. She sat in the darkness, listening to the engines, feeling the vibration through the seat, and thought about McCready. He would have loved this. The old warrior. He lived for missions like this. The impossible ones. The ones where the odds were bad and the stakes were high, and the only thing you could control was your own performance. Emma touched the rifle case beside her, felt the solid weight of it. Somewhere in that case, carved into wood, were 3 sets of initials. 3 men who had defined her life through their choices and their sacrifices. And now she was about to make a choice that would define hers. The loadmaster's voice crackled over the intercom. 5 minutes to exit point, depressurizing now. The team stood and began donning their halo rigs, oxygen masks, altimeters. The parachutes themselves, heavy packs that would deploy automatically if something went wrong, but preferably would deploy when Emma pulled the ripcord at exactly 5,000 feet. She strapped the rifle case to her chest, secured it with multiple redundant attachment points. If she lost the rifle, the mission failed. Simple as that. 2 minutes, the loadmaster called. The cargo ramp began to lower. Wind screamed into the fuselage. The night beyond was absolute. No moon, no stars visible through the oxygen mask and goggles. Just darkness and the knowledge that they were about to step into it with nothing but nylon and physics between them and death. 1 minute, Emma moved to the ramp, Garrett beside her, Reyes and Davis behind. 4 operators about to commit to a course of action that could not be reversed. 30 seconds. Emma's heart was steady, her breathing calm. The fear was there, but it was background noise. Managed, controlled, turned into fuel rather than paralysis. 10 seconds. Green light. Go. Emma stepped off the ramp and fell into the ski. The free fall was silent, peaceful in a way that made no sense. She was plummeting toward Earth at terminal velocity, spinning slowly, the ground somewhere far below invisible in the darkness. But inside the bubble of her oxygen mask, inside the cocoon of her own breathing, there was only calm. She counted seconds. 30, 40, 50. At 60, she checked her altimeter. 25,000 feet, falling at 120 miles per hour. The numbers were abstract, meaningless except as data points in the equation of survival. At 5,000 feet, she pulled the ripcord, felt the jolt as the parachute deployed. The harness cut into her thighs and shoulders as her descent arrested. Then she was gliding, steering with the toggles, using the GPS unit strapped to her wrist to navigate toward the landing zone. The ground came up fast. Emma saw it at the last second. Rocky terrain, uneven. She pulled both toggles to flare the canopy and hit the ground running. Absorbed the impact through her legs. Rolled. Came up with the rifle case clutched to her chest. The parachute collapsed behind her. She quickly gathered the nylon, stuffed it into a compression bag, and buried it under rocks. No trace. No evidence. Ghost did not leave footprints. Garrett landed 30 meters away. Then Reyes. Then Davis. Within 2 minutes, the team was assembled, parachutes buried, weapons ready. They moved out without a word. Silent shapes in the darkness. Invisible to anyone who was not looking for them. And even then, nearly impossible to see. The 5-kilometer movement took 90 minutes. Not because the terrain was difficult, though it was, but because they moved with tactical patience, using every bit of cover, checking every sight line, ensuring that no shepherd or farmer or late-night traveler would stumble across 4 heavily armed Americans where Americans were not supposed to be. Emma's leg wound from Syria was healed, but she could feel the scar tissue pulling with each step. A reminder, a souvenir. The body remembering violence even when the mind tried to forget. At 01:30, they reached the ridge overlooking the compound. Emma crawled to the crest and looked down at their target. The intelligence photos had not done it justice. The compound was a fortress. 3 buildings surrounded by walls 15 feet high. Guard towers at each corner. Spotlights sweeping the perimeter. Men with rifles patrolling in pairs. This was not some random safe house. This was a prepared position held by professionals. Emma set up her hide site with practiced efficiency, a shallow depression behind a cluster of rocks that gave her a clear view of the compound while concealing her position. She laid out her kit, ammunition, range cards, wind meter, water, everything within easy reach. Then she assembled the SR-25. The weapon came together like a puzzle she had solved 1,000 times. Stock, receiver, barrel, scope, each piece clicking into place with satisfying precision. She loaded a magazine, chambered a round, dialed the scope to 800 meters, and settled in to wait. Garrett, Reyes, and Davis moved down the ridge toward the compound. They would breach from the south wall at exactly 0300. Emma's job was to keep them alive from up here, to identify threats, to eliminate targets that posed immediate danger, and above all, to ensure that the broker did not escape. The waiting was always the hardest part. Emma lay behind her rifle, watching the compound through the scope, and felt time stretch and compress in strange ways. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like minutes. The darkness began to fade toward gray. Dawn was coming. They were running out of night. At 02:45, Emma saw movement in the main house. Lights coming on, figures visible through windows. The meeting was starting early, or maybe it had never stopped. Either way, the players were assembling. She keyed her radio, ghost to actual, multiple personnel visible in the main house. Second floor, east wing. Copy ghost, Garrett's voice came back. Stand by. At 02:50, Emma saw him, the broker, Ibrahim Al-Nazari. He appeared at a window on the second floor talking on a phone, gesturing with his free hand. Even at 800 meters, even through the scope, Emma recognized him. The same face from that laptop screen. The face of the man who had killed Hendricks and nearly killed them all. Her finger found the trigger, not pressing, just touching, feeling the curve of it, the slight resistance before the break point. One shot, center mass, the broker goes down, mission complete. But something held her back. Some instinct honed by 6 months of training and 24 years of learning to trust her gut. This was too easy, too clean. The broker standing in a lit window like a target on a range, like he wanted to be seen, like it was a trap. Ghost to actual? Emma whispered. Something's wrong. This feels wrong. Define wrong, Garrett responded. The broker is exposed, standing in a lit window, making no attempt at concealment. Either he's incredibly careless or this is bait. Bait for what? I don't know, Emma admitted. But my gut says we're missing something. There was a pause. Emma could imagine Garrett weighing the options. Trust the intelligence, trust the plan, or trust the instincts of a shooter who had proven herself in Syria. Hold position, Garrett said finally. We're adjusting approach. Stand by. Emma kept her crosshairs on the broker, watched him through the scope, and slowly, piece by piece, the puzzle assembled itself in her mind. The guards were too relaxed, patrolling with the casual rhythm of men who were not expecting trouble. The lights were too bright, the windows too exposed. Everything about this compound screamed security and defense. So why was the most valuable target standing in a lit window like he was posing for a photograph? Because he knows we're coming, Emma realized, and he's counting on us to take the shot. She scanned the compound more carefully, looking not at the obvious, but at the spaces between, the shadows, the places where something might be hiding. And there, in the guard tower, a shape that was not quite right, too angular, too mechanical. Emma adjusted her scope, zoomed in. RPG pointed not at the compound, but out, at the ridge where she was lying. They've got a spotter, Emma whispered into the radio. Someone watching the high ground. They're waiting for me to take the shot. The muzzle flash will give away my position, and they'll light up this ridge with RPGs. How many? Garrett asked. Emma scanned the other towers, found 2 more shapes, 3 RPG, all oriented toward likely sniper positions. 3 that I can see, Emma reported. Probably more. Chief, this whole thing is a setup. They know we're coming. They've been waiting for us. The radio was silent for a long moment. Then, all elements, this is actual. Mission is abort. I say again, abort. Fall back to Rally Point Alpha. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to say they had come too far to quit now. That the broker was right there. Visible, vulnerable. That one shot could end this. But she trusted Garrett. And more importantly, she trusted her own instincts. The instincts that had kept her alive in Syria when everyone else said she should be dead. She began breaking down her position, collecting brass that had not yet been fired, packing gear, moving with the smooth efficiency of someone who had practiced this until it was automatic. And then the compound lit up like noon, floodlights, dozens of them, turning the night into day. And in that sudden illumination, Emma saw what she had missed in the darkness. Not 20 guards, 50, maybe more. They emerged from the buildings, from the guard towers, from spider holes in the ground, armed with AK-47s and RPGs and heavy machine guns. A company-sized force that had been hiding, waiting, preparing to spring a trap on whoever came to kill the broker. And in the second-floor window, the broker raised his phone to his ear and spoke. Emma could not hear the words, but she could read his lips. They're here. Kill them all. The ridge erupted with an incoming fire. Not random shots. Coordinated fire from multiple positions. The enemy had pre-sighted every likely sniper hide within 1,000 meters. They had ranged the distances, calculated the angles, and now they were pouring lead into those positions with the practiced efficiency of men who had been waiting for this moment. Emma rolled left as the rocks where she had been lying exploded under heavy machine gun fire. 50 caliber rounds that turned stone into shrapnel. She scrambled down the reverse slope, moving fast but controlled, using terrain to mask her movement. Ghost, fall back to Rally Point Alpha. Garrett's voice crackled in her earpiece. He was breathing hard, running. We're compromised. Break contact and exfil. Emma kept moving. Her training had covered this scenario. What to do when the mission went sideways. When the intelligence was wrong or the enemy was smarter than expected or Murphy's Law decided to assert itself. You broke contact, created distance, lived to fight another day. But something was nagging at her. Something about the way the broker had stood in that window, the way he had smiled when he gave the order. Like he knew exactly what would happen next. Like this was not just a trap for the assault team. It was something bigger. She reached the rally point, a small depression 400 meters from the ridge. Garrett was already there, along with Reyes and Davis. All three were intact, unhit, but their faces told the story. They had walked into something they were not prepared for. Sound off, Garrett ordered. Everyone check your gear. They did a quick inventory. Ammunition, medical supplies, water. Everything was present, but the weight of the situation was heavier than any ruck. They were 40 kilometers from the Turkish border, in hostile territory, with at least 50 enemy fighters who now knew they were here and were probably organizing pursuit. The math was not good. We need to move now, Davis said. Put as much distance between us and that compound as possible before daylight. Agreed, Garrett said. We follow the planned exfil route, straight shot north to the vehicle cache. We move fast and we move quiet. Questions? Emma raised her hand. Why did they let us get this close? What? Garrett looked at her. Think about it, Emma said. They knew we were coming. They had the compound fortified. They had spotters watching the high ground. They could have engaged us during our approach, but they waited. Let us get into position. Let us see the broker. Why? Garrett considered. To draw us in, make sure we were committed before springing the trap. Maybe, Emma said, but that assumes they knew our insertion point, our route, our timeline. That's not just good security. That's specific intelligence. Someone told them we were coming. There's a leak? Reyes asked. Or the broker wanted us here for a reason, Emma said. Wanted us to see something or do something or... She stopped. The pieces were assembling in her mind. Fast, terrifying. The chemical weapons, she said, they're not in that compound. How do you know? Garrett demanded. Because this whole thing is theater, Emma said. The meeting, the security, the bait in the window. It's all designed to keep us focused on this location while the real transaction happens somewhere else. Garrett pulled out a tablet computer, brought up the intelligence brief. The meeting is confirmed for tonight. Multiple sources. Multiple sources that all pointed to the same location, Emma said. That's not confirmation. That's coordination. Someone made sure we got this intel, made sure we came here. While the actual deal happened somewhere we're not looking. Davis was nodding. It makes sense. Classic misdirection. You want to move something valuable? You create a distraction somewhere else. Draw all the attention there while you slip away. Where? Garrett asked. Where would they do the actual exchange? Emma pulled out her own map, studied the terrain. They're 40 kilometers from the Turkish border. That's the direction everyone expects them to go. But what if they go the other way? She traced a route south and east. There's a Syrian border crossing here, about 60 kilometers. Less secure than the Turkish side. Iraqi officials are easier to bribe. And once they're in Syria, the broker has a dozen places he can disappear. Garrett studied the map. There's nothing on the route, no towns, no villages, just empty desert. Exactly, Emma said, which makes it perfect for a clandestine exchange. You don't need infrastructure, just a road and two vehicles meeting in the middle of nowhere. She tapped a point on the map. Here, this intersection, two roads cross in the middle of nothing. Good sight lines, easy to defend. If I were moving chemical weapons, this is where I'd do the handoff. That's 70 kilometers from our current position, Davis said. We'd have to cross enemy territory, bypass that compound, and hope we're right about a location based on nothing but speculation. Not nothing, Emma said. Logic. The broker didn't set up this elaborate trap just to kill 4 operators. He could have done that a dozen easier ways. He wanted us here, wanted us focused on this compound, wanted us to think we disrupted his plans when really we were never close to them. Garrett looked at the map for a long moment. Then he looked at Emma. You're asking me to abandon the exfil plan, he said, to go deeper into hostile territory based on a hunch. If you're wrong, we're dead, all of us. If I'm wrong, we exfil and the broker moves 4 canisters of VX to terrorists who will use it to kill thousands, Emma said. If I'm right, we have one chance to stop it. The 3 men looked at each other. Emma could see the calculation happening. Trust the plan, trust the intelligence, trust the system that had put them here. Or trust a 24-year-old specialist who had been an operator for all of 6 months. Garrett made his decision. We go south, he said. But Ghost, if you're wrong about this, then I'll take full responsibility, Emma said. Court-martial me. Dishonorably discharge me. I don't care. But I'm not letting those weapons go to people who will use them on civilians. Garrett nodded. All right then, we move in 10 minutes. Reyes, you're on point. Davis, rear security. Ghost, you and I are center. We parallel the road but stay off it. Use whatever cover we can find. And people, we are moving through the Badlands now. No support, no backup. We're on our own. They moved out into the darkness. 4 operators going the wrong direction, away from safety, toward a target that might not exist based on logic that might be flawed. It was the kind of decision that got people killed or won medals. Sometimes both. The terrain was brutal. Rocky hills that tore at their uniforms and boots. Wadis that channeled them into kill zones if they were not careful. Dry riverbeds that offered concealment but could become death traps if the enemy had placed observers in the right positions. Emma's leg was screaming by the second hour, the scar tissue from Syria pulling with every step. But she pushed through it. Pain was just information, the body reporting damage. She acknowledged the report and kept moving. At 04:30, they reached a ridgeline that overlooked the intersection. Emma crawled to the crest and glassed the area with her scope. Empty. Nothing but sand and rock, and 2 roads that crossed at right angles before disappearing into the desert. We're early, Garrett whispered beside her. Or you're wrong. Emma kept searching, looking not for vehicles but for the signs that vehicles had been here recently. Tire tracks, disturbed ground, anything that might confirm her theory. There, she pointed. Fresh tracks, multiple vehicles, heavy ones based on the depth of the impressions. And look at the pattern. They came from the south, stopped at the intersection, then went back the way they came. Garrett studied the tracks. Could be anyone. Civilian traffic, smugglers. At 4 in the morning, Emma asked. In the middle of nowhere? With vehicles heavy enough to leave tracks like that? She looked at her watch. We've got maybe 30 minutes until first light. If the exchange is happening, it'll be soon. They won't want to be exposed in daylight any more than we do. They set up in a hasty defensive position. Emma on the high ground with the SR-25. Garrett, Reyes, and Davis spread out below, covering the approaches, and they waited. The waiting was agony. Every minute that passed made Emma doubt herself more. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe the intelligence was right and they were chasing ghosts. Maybe they had abandoned a viable exfil plan for nothing. At 05:15, when the eastern horizon was just starting to lighten, Emma saw the dust. "Contact south," she whispered. Two vehicles approaching the intersection. Through her scope, she watched them come. Two Toyota Land Cruisers, moving fast but not recklessly. The lead vehicle stopped at the intersection. The second pulled up beside it. Doors opened. Emma counted 6 men, all armed, all moving with the practiced efficiency of professionals. They were not militia, not random fighters. These were trained operators, probably former military, probably very good at what they did. One of them was the broker. Emma recognized him even at this distance. The gray beard, the expensive jacket, the way he moved like someone who was used to other people doing the dangerous work while he made the decisions. "Ghost, you have positive ID on the broker?" Garrett asked. "Confirmed," Emma said. "The broker is here, along with 5 security personnel. No sign of the Chechens yet." As if on cue, a third vehicle appeared from the north. Another Land Cruiser. It stopped 50 meters from the others. More armed men got out. Emma counted 4, plus one unarmed man in civilian clothes who looked nervous. "The Chechen representative," Emma said. "This is it. This is the exchange." She watched through her scope as the broker and the Chechen met in the middle of the intersection. They did not shake hands, did not engage in pleasantries, just business. The Chechen said something. The broker gestured to his vehicle. 2 of the broker's men opened the back of their Land Cruiser. Inside were 4 metal canisters, each one about the size of a propane tank, painted military gray, stenciled with chemical hazard symbols. "VX," Emma said. "I've got eyes on 4 canisters of VX nerve agent. This is the real deal." Garrett's voice was tight. "Can you take the shot on the broker?" "Negative," Emma said. "Too many civilians in the background. If I miss, or if the round over penetrates, I could hit the Chechen or one of the vehicles. We need them to separate." She watched as the Chechen's men approached the canisters. They examined them carefully, checking seals, verifying contents. The kind of inspection that people did when they were buying weapons of mass destruction and wanted to make sure they were getting what they paid for. The inspection took 5 minutes. 5 minutes of Emma lying behind her rifle, finger on the trigger, waiting for a clear shot that never came. The targets kept moving, kept overlapping, kept creating situations where a missed shot could detonate a canister of VX and kill everyone in a half-mile radius. Finally, the Chechen nodded, satisfied. His men began transferring the canisters to their vehicle. The broker's men stood back, weapons ready, making sure the transaction went smoothly. And that was when Emma saw her shot. The broker stepped away from the group, pulled out a phone, turned his back to make a call. For just a moment, he was isolated, clear. No one behind him but empty desert. "I have the shot," Emma whispered. "Take it," Garrett said. Emma's world narrowed to the scope, to the crosshairs, to the man in the center of them who had killed Hendricks and dozens of others, who sold death for profit without conscience or hesitation. She did the math. 850 meters, light wind from the west, temperature rising with the dawn. Bullet drop at this distance would be significant. She dialed the correction into her scope. The crosshairs settled on the broker's center mass. Emma took a breath, let half of it out, found the stillness at the bottom of her lungs where nothing existed except the shot. Her finger tightened on the trigger. 3.2 pounds of pressure. The rifle was ready. She was ready. And McCready's voice echoed in her head. "You made the right choice. The man who surrendered. You did what you had to do." But was this the right choice? Killing the broker from ambush? Executing him without trial or judgment, or any of the legal frameworks that were supposed to govern warfare? Or was that just rationalization, an excuse to hesitate when hesitation could cost lives? Emma thought about Hendricks dying on the floor of that Syrian building, about the wedding ring on the young fighter's hand, about McCready bleeding out in a hospital bed because cancer and war had destroyed his lungs. She thought about the 4 canisters of VX that would be used to kill innocent people in subway stations or shopping malls or anywhere that maximized casualties and terror. She thought about the 3 sets of initials on her rifle stock, 3 generations of warriors who had made hard choices so that others would not have to. And she made her choice. Emma squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The bullet crossed 850 meters in less than 2 seconds. The broker was still holding his phone to his ear when the round struck him in the center of the chest. He dropped without a sound, dead before he hit the ground. Chaos erupted in the intersection. The security personnel scattered, searching for the threat. The Chechens dove for cover behind their vehicle. Weapons came up. Voices shouted in multiple languages. Emma had already cycled the bolt, already acquired her next target. One of the broker's men was running toward the vehicle with the VX canisters, probably planning to destroy them or secure them or do something that would complicate the mission. She fired. The man went down. Another target, another shot. The intersection was becoming a kill zone, but Emma kept firing with mechanical precision. This was what she had trained for, what she was built for. The equation of violence reduced to its simplest form: identify threat, eliminate threat, move to next threat. Ghost, cease fire! Garrett's voice cut through her focus. The Chechens are running. Let them go. Emma lifted her eye from the scope, saw the Chechen vehicle racing north, abandoning the VX canisters in their panic to escape. The broker's remaining men were dead or dying. The intersection was quiet except for the wind. All elements, move to the objective, Garrett ordered. Secure those canisters before anyone else shows up. Emma broke down her position and moved down the ridge. By the time she reached the intersection, Garrett and his team had secured the area. Reyes was photographing the canisters. Davis was collecting intelligence materials from the broker's vehicle. Emma walked to where the broker lay, looked down at the man who had haunted her for 6 months. He looked smaller in death, less threatening. Just an old man in an expensive jacket with a hole in his chest. She felt nothing, no satisfaction, no guilt, just the empty clarity that comes after the trigger is pulled and there is no taking it back. You made the call, Garrett said beside her, and you were right. The weapons are secure. The broker is dead. Mission complete. Emma nodded. She wanted to feel something: victory, relief, pride. But all she felt was tired. We need to move, Davis said. Someone's going to investigate the gunfire. We need to be gone before they arrive. Garrett looked at the canisters. We can't carry those. They're too heavy and too dangerous. I can rig them to detonate, Reyes said. Thermite charges, hot enough to neutralize the VX. We'll destroy them in place. Do it, Garrett ordered. We've got 5 minutes. While Reyes worked, Emma walked back to her rifle, picked it up, ran her hand along the stock, felt the 3 sets of initials under her fingers. I did it, she thought. I stopped him, completed the mission, honored the legacy. But the weight on her shoulders felt heavier than ever. They were 2 kilometers from the intersection when the charges detonated. A pillar of white-hot fire that turned 4 canisters of nerve agent into harmless smoke and ash. The threat was neutralized. The mission was complete. Now all they had to do was survive the 40-kilometer walk to the Turkish border, with every hostile element in the region probably looking for them. Emma adjusted her ruck and started walking, 1 foot in front of the other, the same way she had been walking since her father's funeral, since her grandfather's grave, since the moment McCready had died and left her carrying the weight of all 3 of them. The sun was rising now, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. It was going to be a long day. But Emma had survived long days before. She would survive this one too, because that was what Kellers did. They survived. They completed the mission. And they carried the weight. The 40 kilometers to the Turkish border took 14 hours. 14 hours of moving through terrain that seemed designed to kill anyone foolish enough to cross it on foot. Rocky hills that shredded boots and twisted ankles. Dry wadis where the sun reflected off white stone like a furnace. Stretches of open ground where there was no cover and no shade, and the only option was to move fast and hope no one was watching. Emma's leg was beyond pain by the 4th hour. The scar tissue from Syria had torn open during the climb down from the sniper position. She could feel blood soaking into her sock with every step, but she did not slow down, did not ask for rest. The team moved as a unit or it did not move at all, and stopping meant dying. They rationed water with brutal discipline, 1 swallow every hour, no more. The desert was patient. It would kill you through dehydration as efficiently as any bullet. You had to respect it, had to understand that in this environment, water was more valuable than ammunition. At hour 6, they heard helicopters, attack helicopters from the sound of them. Russian-made Mi-24s, probably Iraqi Air Force, conducting a search pattern. The team went to ground in a wadi and covered themselves with whatever debris they could find, lay motionless while the choppers passed overhead, door gunners scanning the ground below for targets. Emma pressed her face into the dirt and thought about McCready, about the letter he had written, about his words about living for both of them. She wondered if this is what he meant. Lying in the dirt with a torn leg and empty canteen while helicopters hunted overhead. Surviving not because you wanted to, but because quitting was not an option. The helicopters passed. The team moved on. At hour 10, they crossed a paved road. Reyes spotted it first, raised his fist in a halt signal. The team went prone while he crawled forward to observe. Two-vehicle convoy, he reported back. Military trucks, Iraqi army markings, heading south toward the Syrian border. They waited 30 minutes for the road to clear, then sprinted across in pairs. Exposed, vulnerable, but fast. Always fast. Speed was armor when you had nothing else. At hour 12, Davis collapsed, just stopped walking and went down to his knees. Garrett was beside him instantly. "Talk to me, Davis." "Heat exhaustion," Davis said. His voice was slurred. "Everything is spinning." Garrett checked his eyes. Pupils dilated, skin hot and dry, classic signs of heat stroke. They were losing him to the environment. "We need to cool him down," Reyes said. "Get his core temperature down, or he's going into organ failure." "With what water?" Garrett asked. "We've got maybe 2 liters total left for all of us." Emma unslung her pack, pulled out her last full canteen. "Here, use this." "Ghost, that's your water," Garrett said. "I know," Emma said. She handed it to him. "But Davis needs it more than I do." Garrett looked at her for a long moment, then took the canteen and poured it over Davis's head and neck. The water ran down his uniform, wasting into the sand, but the immediate cooling effect was visible. Davis's breathing slowed. His eyes cleared slightly. "Can you walk?" Garrett asked. Davis nodded. "Give me a minute." "We don't have a minute," Emma said. She was staring at the horizon behind them. Dust cloud, multiple vehicles, coming fast from the direction of the compound. "How many?" Garrett asked. "At least 5, Emma said. "Maybe more. They're following our trail." Garrett made a decision. "Davis, you're on Reyes. Reyes, you carry his weapon and gear. We move double time, 30 clicks to the border. We can make it if we move now." They ran. Not the tactical movement they had been using, not the careful advance with security halts and overwatch positions. Just running. 4 operators fleeing across hostile territory with an enemy force behind them and a border ahead that might or might not offer safety. Emma's legs screamed with every step. The torn scar tissue was definitely bleeding now. She could feel her boots squelching with blood. But she kept running because the alternative was capture. And capture meant interrogation, torture, execution. Probably in that order. The Turkish border was marked by a fence, 8 feet of chain link topped with razor wire. It stretched across the desert in both directions as far as Emma could see. On the far side was a dirt road, and beyond that, the vehicle cache where their ride to safety waited. Assuming it was still there, assuming it had not been discovered or stolen or compromised in any of a dozen ways that would turn their escape route into another death trap. Garrett pulled wire cutters from his pack, started working on the fence. The metal was old and rusted, but it was still slow going. Each cut took precious seconds they did not have. Behind them, the dust cloud was getting closer. Emma could hear engines now. Diesel motors pushing vehicles across rough terrain. Voices shouting in Arabic. The sounds of pursuit. Reyes and Emma took up defensive positions facing south. Weapons ready? Wufiyang. They would cover Garrett and Davis, buy them time to get through the fence. And if that meant making a last stand on the Iraqi side of the border, then that is what they would do. The fence parted. Garrett pulled the chain link aside, creating an opening barely wide enough for a man. "Through," he ordered. "Davis first." Davis crawled through, then Reyes. Then Garrett looked at Emma. "Your turn, Ghost." "You go," Emma said. "I'll cover." "That's an order, Specialist," Garrett said. "Through the fence, now." Emma looked at him. Saw something in his eyes. Not fear, but recognition. The understanding that someone might have to stay behind to slow the pursuit, and he had already decided it would not be her. "Chief," Emma started. "Your dad saved McCready," Garrett interrupted. "McCready saved you. Now I'm saving you. That's how this works. We pass it forward. Now get through that fence before I have to make it an order you can't ignore." Emma went through the fence. On the Turkish side, she immediately took up a firing position, covering Garrett as he followed. He was halfway through when the first enemy vehicle crested the ridge 400 meters away. Emma did not hesitate. She put her crosshairs on the vehicle's engine block and fired. The round punched through the radiator. Steam erupted. The vehicle slewed to a stop. She fired again. The windshield spiderwebbed. The driver slumped. "Move, Chief," she called. "I've got you covered." Garrett scrambled through the fence. The instant he was clear, Emma fired 3 more rounds into the stalled vehicle, keeping heads down, buying seconds. "Run!" Garrett shouted. They ran. Across the Turkish side of the border, across the dirt road, into a stand of scrub brush where a dusty Toyota Land Cruiser sat hidden under camouflage netting. Keys in the ignition, full tank of gas, water and medical supplies in the back. The CIA liaison had come through. Garrett started the engine. Reyes and Davis piled into the back. Emma took the passenger seat, rifle ready, covering their 6 as they pulled away. Behind them, more vehicles were arriving at the fence. Men were getting out, pointing, shouting. But they did not cross. The border meant something even in this lawless region. It was a line that Iraqi forces would not cross without causing an international incident. Emma watched them recede in the side mirror until they were just a dust cloud on the horizon. Then she let out a breath she felt like she had been holding since Syria. "We made it," she said. It sounded like a question. "We made it," Garrett confirmed. He was gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make his knuckles white. "Good work back there, Ghost. That last stand at the fence, that was solid." Emma nodded. She wanted to feel relief, victory, something other than the bone-deep exhaustion that had settled into every cell of her body. But all she felt was empty. She looked down at her hands. They were covered in dust and dried blood. The same hands that had pulled the trigger on the broker. That had killed men in Syria. That had made choices that could never be unmade. McCready had asked her to live for both of them. But what did living mean when you were covered in the blood of the people you had killed to survive? The CIA safe house was in a small Turkish town whose name Emma never learned. It was a nondescript building behind a mechanic's shop. Concrete walls, barred windows, the kind of place that existed in every country where America conducted operations it could not acknowledge. The liaison was a man in his 50s who introduced himself as Mike and offered no last name. He had the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in bad places doing questionable things for good reasons. "You look like hell," he observed when they stumbled through the door. "Feel worse," Garrett said. Mike got them set up. Medical supplies, food, clean water, a secure room where they could sleep without worrying about throat cutters in the night. He asked no questions about the mission. Did not need to. The blood and exhaustion told their own story. Emma let a medic look at her leg. The scar tissue from Syria had torn open completely. The medic cleaned it, applied fresh sutures, wrapped it in clean bandages, gave her antibiotics and pain medication that she accepted this time because the mission was over and she could afford to be less than sharp. "You need to stay off this for at least a week," the medic said. "The wound is infected. If you keep pushing it, you're looking at sepsis." "I'll rest when I'm home," Emma said. The medic looked at her with the expression of someone who had heard that line too many times. "Your funeral," he said, and walked away. Emma found a shower. Let hot water run over her until it turned cold. Watched the dirt and blood and dust wash away down the drain. Her body was a map of violence now. Scars from Syria, fresh sutures from Iraq, bruises and cuts, and the kind of deep ache that came from pushing human physiology past its design limits. She got out, dried off, put on the clean clothes that Mike had provided, and looked at herself in the mirror. The face staring back was harder than the one she remembered from 6 months ago. Leaner, older. The eyes had seen things that could not be unseen, had made choices that could not be unmade. Emma Keller was 24 years old, but the woman in the mirror looked ancient. There was a knock on the door, Garrett's voice. "You decent? Come in." Garrett entered. He had cleaned up too, shaved, changed clothes, but he looked as tired as Emma felt. "Mike says we've got a transport to Germany in the morning," Garrett said. "From there, military flight back to the States. You'll be home in 48 hours. "Home," Emma repeated. The word felt strange, foreign. Where was home for someone like her? Not Montana, not the barracks at Fort Bragg, nowhere that felt safe or permanent or like a place where she belonged. Garrett pulled up a chair, sat backwards on it. His expression was serious. "We need to talk about what happened out there," he said. "The mission was successful," Emma said. "The broker is dead. The VX is destroyed. Mission complete." "I'm not talking about the tactical outcome," Garrett said. "I'm talking about you, about the choice you made before taking that shot." Emma did not respond. "I was watching you through the binos," Garrett continued. Saw you acquire the target, saw your finger on the trigger, and then you hesitated. For almost 30 seconds, you had a clear shot and you didn't take it. Why? Emma looked at her hands. Does it matter? I took the shot eventually. It matters because hesitation gets people killed, Garrett said. In that moment, if the broker had moved, if someone had walked into your line of fire, if any of a dozen variables had changed, you would have lost the shot. And those VX canisters would be in Chechnya right now, being weaponized for a terror attack. I was making sure, Emma said. Making sure of what? That I was making the right choice, Emma said. The words came out quiet, almost ashamed. That I wasn't just executing someone because it was convenient, because he was a bad person who deserved to die. I needed to know that I was pulling that trigger for the right reasons. Garrett was quiet for a moment. And what did you decide? That some people need to die so others can live, Emma said. That the broker made his choices and I made mine. That the math was simple, even if the morality wasn't. She looked up at Garrett. But Chief, I felt something before I pulled that trigger. Doubt, hesitation, second thoughts. 6 months ago, you told me the day it stops bothering me is the day I need to quit. Well, it's bothering me, all of it. Syria, the broker, the men I've killed. It's all bothering me, and I don't know if that makes me weak or human or what. That makes you a warrior, Garrett said. Not a killer. There's a difference. Killers don't hesitate, don't question, don't carry the weight. Warriors understand the quantum. They pay it anyway, but they never forget what they're paying for. Emma felt something loosen in her chest, some knot she had been carrying since Syria. McCready told me I was to find something worth the cost, she said. I'm still trying to figure out what that is. You will, Garrett said. And when you do, the weight gets easier to carry. Not lighter, just easier. He stood. Got some sleep, Ghost. You earned it. After he left, Emma lay on the cot that Mike had provided, stared at the ceiling, thought about her father dying in Kuwait, about her grandfather surviving 2 wars only to die in his sleep, about McCready bleeding out in a hospital bed. 3 generations of warriors, all of them paying costs, all of them carrying weight. And now it was her turn. Emma closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But sleep was elusive. Her mind kept replaying the shot, the moment before the trigger pull, the hesitation, the doubt, and McCready's voice in her memory. Purpose, that's what you need. Something worth protecting, something worth the cost. She had eliminated the broker, had stopped a terrorist attack that would have killed thousands, had completed a mission that others could not or would not do. But was that purpose? Or was that just violence in service of a system that would send her to the next target and the next until she was used up and discarded like a weapon that had outlived its usefulness? Emma did not have the answer, but she knew someone who might. 2 weeks later, Emma stood at Arlington National Cemetery. Section 60, the rows of white headstones marching up the hillside in perfect precision. The honor guard stood at attention nearby, ready for the next funeral, the next flag, the next family receiving the gratitude of a nation that could never fully repay the debt. She found McCready's grave easily. The stone was new, white marble that would weather and age like all the others. The inscription was simple. James McCready, Master Chief Warrant Officer, United States Navy, born 1967, died 2025. Faithful unto death. Emma stood before the grave and felt the weight of all the words she had never said, all the questions she had never asked, all the gratitude she had never properly expressed. I did it, Chief, she said quietly. I stopped the broker, destroyed the VX, completed the mission, just like you asked. The headstone offered no response, just silent white marble reflecting the autumn sun. But I'm struggling with the piece, Emma continued, with what it's doing to me. You told me to live for both of us, to find something worth protecting. But Chief, I don't know if I'm living or just surviving. I don't know if I'm protecting people or just killing the enemy. I don't know if I'm a warrior or a weapon or what the difference even is anymore. She touched the headstone. The marble was cool beneath her fingers. I wish you were here, she said. I wish I could ask you if it was worth it, if all the killing and the bleeding and the nightmares were worth whatever we accomplished. If the men we saved were worth the men we killed. If the costs were justified by the outcomes. A voice spoke behind her. He would have said yes. Emma turned. Garrett was standing 10 feet away, hands in the pockets of his dress uniform. He had come to pay his own respects. McCready believed in the mission, Garrett continued. Believed that what we do matters. That the violence we commit prevents greater violence. that the costs we pay save others from having to pay them. Did you believe that? Emma asked. Garrett walked up to stand beside her, looked down at McCready's grave. Most days, he said. Some days I'm not sure. But then I think about the people who are alive because of missions we completed. The terrorist attacks that never happened. The chemical weapons that never got used. The evil men who can't hurt anyone anymore because we put them in the ground. He turned to look at Emma. We don't get to see the people we save, he said. We only see the ones we kill. That's the burden. We have to believe that the invisible good outweighs the visible bad. We have to trust that the system sending us into harm's way knows what it's doing. We have to have faith that our sacrifice means something. And if we lose that faith, Emma asked, then we quit, Garrett said simply. We turn in our weapons and we go home and we let someone else carry the weight. There's no shame in that. Not everyone can do this work. Not everyone should. Emma looked at the 3 graves she had visited today. Her father's, her grandfather's, now McCready's. 3 men who had chosen to carry the weight until it killed them. I'm not ready to quit, she said. I know, Garrett replied. That's why I'm here, to give you this. He pulled an envelope from his pocket, handed it to her. Emma opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Orders. Effective immediately, she was being promoted to sergeant and assigned permanently to a classified unit under JSOC operational control. What is this, she asked. That's your new assignment, Garrett said. You're not going back to regular Army. You're staying with us. Special operations, direct action, the missions no one else can do. You've proven yourself, Ghost. Now it's time to decide if this is what you want. Emma stared at the orders, at the official seal and signatures in bureaucratic language that translated to a life of violence and secrecy and operations that would never be acknowledged. This is what my father did, she said quietly. What my grandfather did, what McCready did. They all served. They all sacrificed. They all died for it. They did, Garrett confirmed. But they also saved lives, prevented atrocities, made the world a safer place for people who will never know their names. That has to count for something. Does it? Emma asked. Does it balance out? All the killing, all the blood, all the nightmares. Does it balance? I don't know, Garrett said honestly. But I know that if we don't do it, someone else has to. And maybe they're not as good. Maybe they make mistakes. Maybe innocent people die because we weren't there to make the hard choices. He pointed at McCready's grave. He believed it balanced, Garrett said. He believed right up until the end that what we do matters. That's why he died in the field instead of in a hospital bed, because he wanted his last act to mean something. Emma folded the orders, put them in her pocket. I need some time, she said, to figure out if I can keep doing this. Take all the time you need, Garrett said. But Ghost understands something. The moment you put on the uniform, the moment you picked up that rifle, you signed up for this. Not the paperwork, not the official assignment, but the weight, the burden, the knowledge that you're one of the few people willing to stand between evil and innocence. He started to walk away, then stopped. McCready told me something once, he said, after a particularly bad mission. I asked him how he kept going, how he dealt with the cost. You know what he said? Emma shook her head. He said, purpose isn't something you find. It's something you build. One mission at a time, one choice at a time, one life saved at a time. You don't wake up one day knowing your purpose. You create it through your actions. Garrett walked away, leaving Emma alone with 3 graves and a decision that would define the rest of her life. She stood there as the sun tracked across the sky, painting the headstones in shades of gold and amber. As other families came and went, bringing flowers and tears in their own private conversations with the dead, as the honor guard performed their rituals with mechanical precision, folding flags with movements honed by repetition, firing volleys that echoed across the hills, playing taps on a bugle that sang of loss and honor and sacrifice. Emma watched it all, witnessed ceremony after ceremony, saw the faces of widows and children and aging parents receiving flags, saw the weight settle on their shoulders the way it had settled on hers all those years ago, saw the next generation inheriting the legacy of service and wondering if they were strong enough to carry it. She thought about all the funerals she had attended over the past 10 years. Brothers in arms who did not make it home, operators whose names appeared on no public memorial, casualties of a war that most Americans did not know was still being fought. She had stood at attention at 23 military funerals, had helped fold 23 flags, had watched 23 families break under the weight of loss. And every single time she had wondered if the mission had been worth it, if the objective justified the sacrifice, if the tactical outcome balanced the human cost. She still did not have an answer. Maybe there was no answer. Maybe some questions were meant to be carried rather than solved. Emma stood there and thought about purpose, about legacy, about the 3 sets of initials carved into her rifle stock and what they represented to her now compared to what they had represented 10 years ago. When she was 24, those initials had been a burden, a weight to carry, a standard to live up to. The pressure of generational expectation crushing down on shoulders too young to bear it properly. Now at 34, they were something different. They were permission. Permission to serve in her own way. Permission to define legacy on her own terms. Permission to decide that she had done enough and it was okay to stop. Her grandfather had fought for 2 wars in 60 years. Her father had fought for 1 war and given everything. McCready had fought for 34 years and chose his ending. Emma had fought for 10 years and was choosing hers. That was the lesson they had been trying to teach her all along. Not that she had to follow their path exactly, but that she had to choose her own path with the same commitment, the same integrity, the same willingness to pay the cost that purpose demanded. Finally, she made her decision. Emma pulled out her phone. The screen showed her reflection. Older, harder, but still recognizably herself underneath the layers of experience and scar tissue. She dialed a number she had memorized but never called. Colonel Morrison's office, a voice answered. Professional, efficient, the machinery of military bureaucracy grinding forward. "This is Sergeant Keller," Emma said. Her voice was steady, certain, no hesitation, no doubt, just clarity. "Call sign Ghost. I'm accepting the assignment. When do I report for duty?" There was a pause, the sound of keys clicking, papers shuffling, the administrative confirmation of a choice that would shape the next decade of her life. "Monday morning," the voice said. "Oh, 800 hours sharp. Dam Neck, Virginia, Building 7. Ask for Chief Garrett at the front desk. He's expecting you." "Welcome to the unit, Sergeant. We're glad to have you." Emma hung up. She looked at the 3 graves one last time. 3 men who had defined her life through their choices and their sacrifices and their unwavering commitment to something larger than themselves. 3 warriors who had shown her what it meant to carry the weight and never complain about how heavy it was. "I'm staying in," she said. "I'm going to keep doing this. Not because I'm trying to live up to you, not because I think I owe you something, but because someone has to. And I'd rather it be me than someone who doesn't understand the cost." She touched McCready's headstone again. "Rest easy, Chief. I've got the watch." 6 months later, Emma stood in a different desert, a different country whose name appeared on no official reports. She was lying behind her rifle on a rocky ridge overlooking a compound where bad men were planning bad things. The mission brief had been simple. High-value target, direct action, eliminate with prejudice. Emma had stopped asking questions about the moral justification, had stopped second-guessing the intelligence, had learned to trust the system while maintaining healthy skepticism about its fallibility. She watched the target through her scope, waited for the shot to present itself, and thought about purpose. She had built something over the past 6 months. Not certainty, not moral clarity, but a framework for understanding why she did what she did. She protected people who could not protect themselves. She eliminated threats before they could harm innocents. She made hard choices so others did not have to. She carried weight that would break most people. And she did it because someone had to, and she had proven capable. That was her purpose, not glorious, not clean, but real. The target moved into her crosshairs. Emma did the math. Distance, wind, temperature, all the variables that determined whether the bullet would find its mark. And then she did something she had not done since Iraq. She hesitated. Not from doubt, not from fear, but from respect. For the weight of what she was about to do, for the life she was about to end, for the cost that would be added to the ledger she carried. She thought about her father in Kuwait, about her grandfather on Omaha Beach, about McCready bleeding out in a hospital bed. 3 generations of warriors who had paid the cost so others would not have to. Now it was her turn. Emma took a breath, let half of it out, found the stillness at the bottom of her lungs, and pulled the trigger. The rifle bucked. The bullet flew true. The target dropped. Emma cycled the bolt, acquired the next target, and continued the mission. Because that was what warriors did. They carried the weight. They paid the quinine. They protected the innocent from the wolves. And they did it not because it was easy, not because it was glorious, not because anyone would ever thank them. They did it because it needed doing, and they were the ones who answered the call. 10 years later, Staff Sergeant Emma Keller stood in a different cemetery, this time in Montana, the place where her story had begun all those years ago when she was a child who did not understand death and stood at her father's grave without crying. The mountains were the same. The wind carried the same scent of pine and snow. The sky was the same impossible blue that made you believe anything was possible if you were brave enough to reach for it. But everything else had changed. Emma had changed. Her grandfather's grave had weathered over the decade, the marble worn by Montana winters and summer sun. But the letters were still legible, carved deep enough to outlast the woman reading them. Robert Keller, Sergeant Major, United States Army, World War II, Korea, 2 wars, 60 years of carrying the weight. Next to him lay her father, David Keller, Captain, United States Army, Gulf War, killed in action. The man she had known for only 5 years, but who had shaped her entire life through his absence. Emma had come home for the anniversary, 10 years since she had stood at McCready's grave in Arlington and made the choice that defined her life. 10 years of missions conducted in the shadows, of targets eliminated without acknowledgement, of choices made in places that officially did not exist. She had scars now, too many to count. Her body was a map of a decade spent at war. The leg wound from Syria had never fully healed. She walked with a slight limp that got worse in cold weather and made the younger operators joke that the old lady was slowing down. Her hands bore burn scars from breaching charges, cut scars from broken glass and razor wire, a puckered mark on her shoulder where a bullet had found flesh in Yemen, the accumulated damage of a life lived violently. But she was alive, against all odds, against all reasonable expectation, against the actuarial tables that said people in her profession had a life expectancy measured in missions rather than years. She had survived a decade. She had led teams into hostile territory in 7 countries, had trained Allied forces in tactics and techniques, had mentored younger operators the way Garrett had mentored her, had built something that looked like purpose from the raw materials of violence and sacrifice. Emma placed flowers on both graves, white lilies for her grandfather, red roses for her father. Then she stood at attention in her dress uniform and rendered a salute that was sharper and more precise than the one she had given as a specialist 10 years ago. "I did what you asked," she said to the stones and the wind and the ghosts of men who could not answer. "I served, I carried the weight, I made the hard choices, and I'm still here, still standing, still fighting." The wind carried her words away, across the Montana hills toward the mountains, where her grandfather had taught her to shoot when she was 10 years old and the world made sense. "I don't know if it balanced," she continued. Her voice was quiet but steady. "If the good outweighed the bad, if the costs were justified by the outcomes. I've killed men whose faces I still see when I close my eyes. I've made choices that haunt me in the spaces between missions. I've sacrificed parts of myself that I'll never get back." She paused, let the weight of those words settle. "But I've also saved lives," she said, "prevented attacks that would have killed hundreds, stopped weapons from reaching terrorists, protected people who will never know my name or understand the price that was paid for their safety. And if that's not enough to balance the ledger, then maybe balance was never the point. Maybe purpose was the point. Maybe duty was the point. Maybe sacrifice was the point all along." Emma lowered her salute, touched her grandfather's headstone, then her father's. "I'm getting out," she said. The words surprised her even as she spoke them. "After 10 years, I'm hanging up the uniform, not because I'm broken, not because I can't do it anymore, but because I've paid enough, because the debt is settled, because I've earned the right to live the rest of my life for myself instead of for the mission." She had made the decision 3 months ago, had submitted her resignation papers, had said goodbye to Garrett and Reyes and Davis and the other operators who had become closer than family, had packed up her gear and cleaned out her locker and turned in her security clearances. The Army had tried to talk her out of it, offered promotions, offered command positions, offered every incentive they could think of to keep an operator with her skills and experience. But Emma had been firm. She was done. Not bitter, not angry, just done. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a photograph. It showed a team of operators standing in front of a helicopter somewhere in Afghanistan. 6 people in full kit, faces obscured by helmets and gear, weapons at the ready. Emma was in the center, smaller than the others but unmistakably present, unmistakably part of the team. On the back of the photograph, written in Garrett's handwriting, "The best never quit and the quitters never win. But sometimes the best know when to stop. Proud of you, Ghost." Emma smiled. "Leave it to Garrett to make even retirement sound like a tactical decision." "I'm going to teach," she said to the graves. "Montana State University offered me a position, assistant professor of engineering. I'll be working with students, teaching them about structures and stress loads and how to build things that last. It's not saving the world, but maybe it's saving my world. Maybe that's enough." She had bought a small house outside Bozeman, had adopted a dog from the local shelter, a three-legged mutt named Tango who had survived being hit by a car and decided that surviving was worth the effort, had started going to therapy once a week to process a decade of trauma that she had been pushing down and ignoring and pretending did not affect her. It was strange, this civilian life, this world of grocery stores and traffic jams and neighbors who complained about lawn maintenance instead of incoming fire. But it was also peaceful in a way that Emma had forgotten was possible. She pulled out one more item, her rifle, the SR-25 that had belonged to her father. That bore 4 sets of initials now, RK, DKJM, EK, 4 generations carved into wood that had absorbed decades of recoil and rain and blood. "I'm donating this to the Special Operations Museum," Emma said, "so other people can see it, so they can understand what legacy means. So the names carved into this stock can remind people that freedom isn't free and peace isn't permanent, and every generation has to decide what they're willing to sacrifice to protect what matters." She held the rifle one last time, felt its familiar weight, the balance that came from years of customization and use. This weapon had saved her life more times than she could count, had taken lives in numbers she tried not to remember, had been the constant companion through a decade of missions that ranged from surgical strikes to running firefights. But she did not need it anymore, did not want it in her house, did not want the daily reminder of what she had been and what she had done. It belonged in a museum, behind glass, where it could serve as memorial instead of tool. "Thank you," she said to the rifle, to the ghosts, to her father and grandfather in McCready. "Thank you for showing me what service means, what sacrifice requires, what legacy demands. I'll carry what you taught me for the rest of my life, but I'm done carrying your weight. That burden is laid down now." Emma placed the rifle gently against her grandfather's headstone. Then she turned and walked back to her truck. The mountains watched her go. The wind whispered through the pines. The graves stood silent witness to a warrior coming home. Emma drove away from the cemetery with tears on her face but a smile on her lips. She was 24 when she had entered the shadows, 34 when she stepped back into the light. A decade of her life given to a cause that would never be fully acknowledged. But she had no regrets. She had done what needed doing, had answered the call when it came, had stood in the gap between evil and innocence for 10 years. And now, finally, she was allowing someone else to take the watch. She thought about McCready's letter, about building purpose, one choice at a time. She had built a warrior's purpose, had forged it through fire and blood and impossible choices, had created meaning from missions and sacrifice and the weight of responsibility. Now it was time to build a different purpose, a civilian purpose, a life measured not in targets eliminated but in students taught, not in threats neutralized but in bridges built, not in wars fought but in peace earned. The road stretched ahead, Montana sky endless above. Emma Keller drove toward her future with the ghosts of her past riding quietly in the passenger seat. She would never forget them, would carry their lessons and their sacrifices for the rest of her life, but she would not let them define her anymore. She was more than the sum of her missions, more than the tally of her kills, more than the scars on her body and the weight on her soul. She was Emma Keller, daughter, granddaughter, warrior, teacher, survivor. And for the first time in 10 years, that was enough. The end.